Chapter 28. King Murongci of Jinshi sends his troops. Chu Fan enjoys his leisurely time. A few days passed, and news of the 30,000 iron cavalry of Tianguan City perishing in a monster beast mountain range also spread. Of course, within a few days, this news only spread throughout the western region. In the West Town King's estate, King of Jinshi Murongci looked gloomily in the direction of the monster beast mountain range. He had now received news of his little one perishing in the monster beast mountain range, and at the same time, his half-step divine roaming realm subordinate, who went to seek revenge, also led 30,000 troops to perish in the monster beast mountain range. Greetings, Your Highness. After 2 days of investigation, your subordinate found that during the period the little one perished in the monster beast mountain range. Not only was the little one there, but the Prince of Jinbei's heir apparent also seemed to have appeared in the monster beast mountain range. However, whether the little one's demise is related to him has not been investigated. The butler of the West Town King's estate slowly walked up to Murongci, bowed respectfully, and said, Chu Fan of the Prince of Jinbei's estate? I didn't expect him to appear in the monster beast mountain range. Have you found out who was with him? A sharp glint instantly appeared in Murongci's eyes upon hearing the butler's words, and then he slowly questioned the butler. He only brought 4 guards with him, and there was a maid and a drunkard in the carriage. Your subordinate did not detect anyone hidden in the shadows. After hearing Murongci's words, the butler slowly relayed the information he had gathered, and at the same time, a hint of undetectable excitement appeared in his eyes. Instead of staying properly in his Prince of Jinbei's estate, he chose to come to my western region to seek death. In that case, this king will grant his wish. Murongci no longer cared whether his little one was killed by Chu Fan. His goal was very clear now, to kill Chu Fan. After all, this was a rare opportunity, and Murongci and the Murong family could not miss it. Pass down the order to mobilize 10,000 Golden Tiger cavalry to accompany me to the Monster Beast Mountain Range. Murongci looked at the Monster Beast Mountain Range and instructed the butler beside him. Then Murongci himself directly left the estate, and as he left, several cultivators with powerful and varied auras appeared beside him. Among them were elders, middle-aged individuals, and generals. The butler's speed was also very swift, summoning 10,000 Golden Tiger cavalry to Jinshi City in less than an hour. Murongci, accompanied by the strong individuals and the 10,000 Golden Tiger cavalry, galloped towards the Monster Beast Mountain Range. On the other side, Chu Fan, who had just entered the Meteor Dragon Mountain Range, was unaware that Murongci was already leading 10,000 Golden Tiger cavalry in pursuit of him. However, even if he knew, he wouldn't care too much, as he still had many unsummoned armies in his system space. At this moment, another elder appeared beside Chu Fan, but this elder looked somewhat disheveled, as if he were an ordinary, unremarkable person. When this elder spoke, he revealed 2 old yellow teeth, and he was holding a box in his arms, always with a smile on his face. Old Huang, how dare you snatch this heir apparent's food? Chu Fan couldn't help but say to the elder, looking at the food in his hand. Heir apparent, Old Huang was too hungry to resist, so I could only trouble you. The elder in front of Chu Fan showed a hint of apology on his face upon hearing Chu Fan's voice, and then looked at Chu Fan with a look of I'm sorry. Forget it, forget it. This heir apparent is magnanimous and won't bother with you. Chu Fan helplessly waved his hand at the elder in front of him, but he was very happy with the elder's attitude towards him, as Old Huang, among the summoned people, gave him a better feeling than the others. Everyone else treated him with great reverence, but Old Huang interacted with him like a friend. Old Huang was the character Chu Fan summoned this time, and Chu Fan did not expect to summon such a character when he did. Old Huang was also the cultivator with the highest cultivation among all the characters Chu Fan had summoned. His cultivation had reached the late Dharma aspect stage, just 1 step away from reaching the perfected Dharma aspect realm. Such an existence could be said to be invincible in the entire eastern region. After these few days of venturing, Luo Tianyi and the others also found the spirit-opening fruit, but they did not leave. After all, they were currently in the Meteor Dragon Mountain Range, not the Monster Beast Mountain Range, so, with their current strength, they naturally dared not leave just like that. So, the 3 of them, Luo Tianyi, were still following Chu Fan's team. At this moment, Chu Fan took the food handed to him by Qing Yao again and began to eat, while the little one, Luo Qingyun, chewed her food beside him. Her cheeks puffed out from eating too fast, making her look like a small hamster. Chu Fan couldn't help but pinch the little one's face, looking at her adorable appearance. The little one, feeling the warmth from Chu Fan's hand, also looked up and stared at Chu Fan with her big, curious eyes. Chu Fan couldn't help but laugh at the little one's appearance. At this point, Chu Fan no longer had his initial thoughts, At first, he was thinking about how to trick the little one into the Prince of Jinbei's estate. But now, he didn't like the little one because of her physique. Instead, he found her very interesting. Luo Tianyi, who was nearby, also had a gentle smile in her eyes at this scene. Her sister had been afraid of strangers since she was a child, but in front of Chu Fan, she was very uninhibited, which made Luo Tianyi genuinely happy for her sister. As for Uncle Yun, who was on the side, he even showed an auntie-like smile. While the scene on Chu Fan's side was very warm, at the central location of the Meteor Dragon Mountain Range, a handsome middle-aged man was leading a dozen people behind him, continuously approaching a cliff. Halfway up this cliff, a pool of milky white water could be seen. This was not real water, but the legendary spirit milk, which could enhance a cultivator's cultivation aptitude. The middle-aged man and the dozen people behind him had clearly set their sights on this pool of spirit milk. The middle-aged man looked at the spirit milk not far away and made a silencing gesture to the dozen people behind him. Then he quickly leaped up. The next second, the middle-aged man appeared directly beside the pool of spirit milk. Seeing the spirit milk within reach, the middle-aged man's eyes were filled with excitement, and then he eagerly pulled out a huge container and quickly filled it with the spirit milk in front of him. Just as the middle-aged man was happily filling the container, a strong killing intent suddenly locked onto him, and then a black shadow flashed. A black giant python, hundreds of feet tall, appeared directly in front of the middle-aged man. The black giant python stared leisurely at the middle-aged man in front of him. Chapter 29: Escape from the Depths of the Meteor Dragon Mountains. Encounter with Shangguan Qingsheng, the second most beautiful woman on the list. At this moment, the middle-aged man naturally also discovered the black giant python, so he quickly threw the container in his hand into a storage ring. Then, he leaped high into the air, and in just a few jumps, the middle-aged man reached the top of the cliff, then directly shouted to the dozen or so people in front of him, "What are you standing around for? Run!" After speaking, the middle-aged man continued to sprint forward. The others, seeing this scene, also followed his pace and ran forward. Their speed was so fast that only streaks of afterimages could be seen flashing across the world. But how could the black giant python behind them let them escape so easily? The black giant python continuously weaved through the trees and bushes, and its speed was in no way inferior to that of the middle-aged man and his group. At the same time, the black giant python occasionally spewed out clumps of venom from its mouth. When these venoms landed on the ground, even the earth was instantly corroded. Seeing this scene, the middle-aged man and the others couldn't help but tremble with fear. After all, if such venom were to spray on them, even as cultivators, they wouldn't be able to withstand its corrosion. Inchi, you, and I will stay behind to cover for the prince. Seeing the black giant python about to catch up to their group, one of the men in black, who had a silver flower embroidered on his clothes, suddenly stopped and roared to the back. After his words fell, another man in black, also with a silver flower embroidered on his clothes, stopped. Both of their eyes were filled with determination. "Come back alive." The middle-aged man looked at the two who seemed ready to die, and although he knew their chances of survival were slim, he still spoke to them with hope. Then, the middle-aged man led the remaining people to continue rushing forward. As for the two who stayed behind to cover, they directly engaged in a fierce battle with the black giant python. Although both of them were strong, they only managed to hold off the black giant python for a moment. After a moment, the two were directly sent flying by the black giant python's tail. Fortunately, the black giant python's main target at this time was not the two of them, so they managed to escape death, though now it was difficult for them to even stand up. And the black giant python also continued to chase in the direction of the middle-aged man. Clearly, it would not give up so easily. The middle-aged man naturally also saw the black giant python continuing to chase him. He cursed it as a beast under his breath, and then continued to flee rapidly. At this time, Chu Fan, who had entered the Meteor Dragon Mountain Range, also began to wander around inside the Meteor Dragon Mountain Range. Although the net of Luo's power was very strong, their information regarding the Meteor Dragon Mountain Range was somewhat lacking. So in these past few days, the net of Luo had not collected any news about Chu Fan's father, Chu Tianxiu. On this day, Chu Fan and his group, who were wandering in the Meteor Dragon Mountain Range, suddenly heard the sound of battle ahead. Hearing the sound of people fighting ahead, a glimmer of hope rose in Chu Fan's heart. So he quickly rushed in the direction from which the battle sounds came. Upon arriving at the source of the sound, Chu Fan then saw that it was a beautiful woman with a charming appearance, barefoot and floating in the air, battling several Grotto Heaven Realm Yao beasts. This beautiful woman's cultivation had also reached the Grotto Heaven Realm, but under the encirclement of so many Grotto Heaven Realm and below Grotto Heaven Realm Yao beasts, the beautiful woman seemed somewhat overwhelmed. She continuously used the surrounding environment to dodge the attacks of these Yao beasts. And this beautiful woman didn't know how she had provoked these Yao beasts. So these Yao beasts had no intention of letting her go. Multicolored attacks directly assailed the beautiful woman. The beautiful woman, who was fleeing, suddenly sensed something at this moment, so she cast her gaze in Chu Fan's direction. Seeing the exceedingly handsome Chu Fan in front of her, a look of astonishment appeared in the beautiful woman's eyes. But at this moment, she didn't have much time to scrutinize Chu Fan. She quickly darted towards Chu Fan's direction, a look of joy appearing on her face. "Young master, please save this humble one." After arriving beside Chu Fan, the beautiful woman spoke sweetly to Chu Fan. Xiao Qingyun, seeing this scene, looked at the beautiful woman in front of her with alert vigilance, tightly clutching Chu Fan's neck, as if she didn't want the beautiful woman to snatch Chu Fan away. "I am merely a humble meridian opening realm cultivator. How could I save a lady?" Chu Fan gently stroked Xiao Qingyun's hair in his arms, and then spoke to the beautiful woman in front of him. "The people beside young master are not mortals. It would be easy for them to eliminate these Yao beasts. Does young master have the heart to watch this humble one perish like this?" After hearing Chu Fan's words, the beautiful woman's eyes suddenly became pitiful, and her pair of sparkling eyes stared at Chu Fan. "Dianwei." Chu Fan looked at the beautiful woman in front of him and directly spoke to the person behind him. Dianwei, hearing his young master call his name, gave a simple-minded laugh, then brandished his great halberd and charged over. These Yao beasts were like playthings in his hands. He easily slayed the Yao beasts in front of him. Even Grotto Heaven Realm Yao beasts couldn't withstand a single move from Dianwei. The beautiful woman, seeing this scene, was instantly shocked. Although she felt that anyone who could enter the Meteor Dragon Mountain range was not a simple character, she had not expected that this handsome young man in front of her would be accompanied by such a powerful individual. "Lady, can you tell me your name now?" Seeing Dianwei resolve these Yao beasts so quickly, Chu Fan showed no surprise. Instead, he spoke to the beautiful woman in front of him with a gentle smile. "My name is Shangguan Qingcheng. You can call me Qingcheng." The beautiful woman, Shangguan Qingcheng, did not hide anything. She chuckled at Chu Fan and then revealed her name. "Young Master Chu. She should be Shangguan Qingcheng, ranked second on the Eastern region's beauty list, and she is also the sect master of the demonic heaven sect of the Tianqing dynasty." As Shangguan Qingcheng's words just fell, Luo Tianyi, who was behind Chu Fan, slowly stepped forward and spoke to Chu Fan. During their time together these past few days, Luo Tianyi's address for Chu Fan had also changed from the former, Young Lord Chu, to the current, Young Master Chu. Chapter 30, The Enchanting Demoness Shangguan Qingcheng, the Fairy Junzian. After hearing Luo Tianyi's words, Chu Fan slowly began to appraise Shangguan Qingcheng, who stood before him. He had not expected to meet Shangguan Qingcheng here. Shangguan Qingcheng's beauty already surpassed that of Luo Tianyi, though the main reason for this was that Shangguan Qingcheng was older than Luo Tianyi. After all, Luo Tianyi had not fully matured yet, meaning that the current Luo Tianyi had not reached her peak appearance. So it is Fairy Luo, one of the 4 great beauties of Great Yin. I didn't expect the young master to have such a beautiful woman accompanying him. Shangguan Qingcheng naturally noticed Luo Tianyi at this moment. She lightly brushed past Chu Fan, her eyes gazing faintly at Luo Tianyi behind her. Luo Tianyi felt slightly uncomfortable under Shangguan Qingcheng's gaze, so she frowned and took a step back. "May I ask how Miss Shangguan came to be here?" Chu Fan naturally noticed Luo Tianyi's discomfort, so he slowly walked forward and gently asked Shangguan Qingcheng. He was truly curious why Shangguan Qingcheng had appeared here. After all, to reach the Meteor Dragon Mountain range from the Tianqing dynasty, one must pass through the western or northern borders, and traveling such a long distance to reach the Meteor Dragon Mountain range certainly wasn't for fun. "I was chased here, my dear. Young master, will you be able to protect me on the way back?" After hearing Chu Fan's question, a flash of slyness crossed Shangguan Qingcheng's face, and then she looked pitifully at Chu Fan. Miss Shangguan must be joking. As the sect master of the Motion sect, who would dare to chase Miss Shangguan? Chu Fan did not dare to believe a single word from the woman in front of him, as no truth could be heard from the mouth of such an enchanting woman. "Everything I said is true. The one chasing me is the sect master of the Jade Maiden Sword sect. She is even using the banner of eliminating evil for the people to hunt me down." After hearing that Chu Fan did not believe her, Shangguan Qingcheng stepped forward and spoke again. At the same time, the hint of pity in her eyes caused a pang of sympathy to rise in Chu Fan's heart. However, Chu Fan quickly suppressed it. He had not expected the woman before him to be so terrifying. "Young Master Chu, I think what this woman said might be true. The Jade Maiden Sword sect and the Motion sect are mortal enemies. I often heard about the two of them fighting each other. Now that I think about it, both of them must be here in the Meteor Dragon Mountain range. Just as Chu Fan was pondering, Luo Tiany's voice slowly drifted out from behind him. Chu Fan was slightly puzzled after hearing Luo Tiany's words. He was not puzzled that Shangwan Qinsheng was being chased, but rather why Luo Tiany knew so much. What Chu Fan did not know was that besides cultivating, Luo Tiany had always paid attention to the situation in the entire eastern region. So Luo Tiany naturally knew a great deal about the region's affairs. Chu Fan's original body was that of a martial arts fanatic, so he naturally did not know as much as Luo Tiany did. If his original self had not been such a martial arts fanatic, he would have heard the stories of Shangwan Qinsheng and the other person. Although what Miss Shangwan said is true, I did not have time to escort Miss Shangwan out. I can only ask Miss Shangwan to leave by herself. Chu Fan only spoke to Shangwan Qinsheng after thinking for a moment. He did not want to be continuously entangled with this woman. After all, whenever he was with Shangwan Qinsheng, Chu Fan felt a power on her body that attracted him. It was as if Shangwan Qinsheng, standing before him, could ignite the desires in his heart at any moment. If the young master doesn't have time, could you allow me to follow you? Shangwan Qinsheng seemed to have anticipated Chu Fan's words. She raised her large, watery eyes and looked at Chu Fan with anticipation. All right, then Miss Shangwan can follow me. Looking at the expectant Shangwan Qinsheng, Chu Fan ultimately couldn't bring himself to drive her away, so he sighed helplessly and spoke slowly. I thank the young master here and now. Shangwan Qinsheng was very happy after hearing Chu Fan's words. From this moment on, Chu Fan's group gained one more person. May I ask what young Master Chu's family does? They are merchants. Then has young Master Chu studied business? No. I heard that the heir of the prince of Zhenbei's estate of the Great Yin Dynasty is a prodigy. Has young Master Chu heard of him? I have heard of him, but I doubt it is true. Then young Master Chu's. For the rest of the journey, Shangwan Qinsheng kept asking Chu Fan questions until Chu Fan became somewhat impatient to answer. However, it also added some interest to the boring journey. As for the little girl Luo Qinyan, ever since Shangwan Qinsheng joined the group, she had clung to Chu Fan and refused to get down, seemingly afraid that Shangwan Qinsheng would steal Chu Fan away. Shangwan Qinsheng was also very familiar, making the little girl blush deeply several times in just half a day. At this moment, not far from Chu Fan's group, a cold, white-robed woman was resting on the top of a tree hundreds of feet high. This cold woman wore a white veil, which made her appear even more mysterious. Yet people couldn't help but want to approach her. Silence reigned around her, and under the sunlight, she still felt profoundly cold. Shangwan Qinsheng, no matter where you run, I will kill you. The cold woman looked around the environment, and after finding no clues, she spoke coldly with her frigid face. After speaking, the cold woman began to move through the treetops. With every step she took, she reappeared several hundred meters after the previous step vanished. The low-realm Yao beasts in the vicinity did not dare to approach the woman, retreating one after another upon sensing her aura. This cold woman was none other than Jun Zian, the sect master of the Jade Maiden Sword sect. She was also ranked first on the beauty list of the eastern region. Her cultivation was similar to Shangwan Yeners. It could be said that both of them were prodigies of the Tianqing dynasty, but unfortunately, their identities were different. One was the sect master of the Jade Maiden Sword sect of the Righteous Path, while the other was the sect master of the Mo Tian sect of the Demonic Path. This led to the two women becoming lifelong enemies from the moment they were born. The number of major battles between the two was at least in the thousands, if not tens of thousands. This time, it was also because the two had engaged in a great battle that they chased each other all the way from the Tianqing dynasty into the Meteor Dragon Mountain range. It was also because of this great battle that Chu Fan met Shangwan Qinsheng. Otherwise, how could Chu Fan possibly encounter Shangwan Qinsheng, the sect master of the Mo Tian sect from the Tianqing dynasty? Chapter 31 Zhao Zilong slays the giant python. Father and son reunite. Chu Fan and the others quickly continued their journey in the Meteor Dragon Mountain range for 2 days. During these 2 days, Chu Fan also completely understood the temperament of Shangwan Qinsheng, who was before him. Although Shangwan Qinsheng seemed somewhat unreliable on the surface, she was extremely vigilant when carrying out tasks. During their time traveling through the Meteor Dragon Mountain range, Shangwan Qinsheng had constantly maintained her alertness. Young master, there's a person ahead whose chi is similar to yours. He must be the person young master is looking for on this trip. Just as Chu Fan was planning to let the team rest here, old Huang, who was beside him, suddenly stood up, looked ahead, and spoke to Chu Fan. Were you able to sense his realm? Upon hearing old Huang's words, Chu Fan immediately asked him with an expectant look. Chu Fan felt somewhat helpless being in the Meteor Dragon Mountain range these days. As soon as he found his father, Prince of Zhenbei, he planned to return quickly. After all, he could leisurely drink tea and practice martial skills in the Prince of Zhenbei's estate. But the living environment in this mountain range was extremely poor, and Chu Fan did not want to continue suffering here. Young master, let's save him first. After hearing Chu Fan's words, Old Huang showed a mysterious smile. Young master, the person Old Huang mentioned is currently being hunted by a giant snake in the half-step Faxiang realm. Zhao Zilong, who was standing nearby, also stepped forward and spoke, while a look of eagerness appeared on his face. After all, since he was born, he had not encountered an enemy who truly required him to act. Although this giant snake in the half-step Faxiang realm could not make him use his true strength, Zhao Zilong could still have a good fight. Zilong, go and rescue him. I want to see if it's my father, Prince of Jinbei. At this moment, a hint of schadenfreude appeared on Chu Fan's face. He could already imagine the embarrassed expression on his father's face when he saw his own son rescuing him. After Chu Fan finished speaking, Zhao Zilong quickly turned into a white light and vanished from the spot. His figure could be seen constantly weaving through the mountain range. Chu Fan also did not intend to wait here. Instead, he led the people beside him toward the direction Zhao Zilong was heading. At the same time, a middle-aged man was constantly fleeing under the pursuit of a black giant python. At this moment, many wounds had appeared on his body. Fortunately, these wounds were not fatal, so he still had the strength to run. This damned beast. This prince only took a bit of your spiritual milk. Was it necessary to chase this prince for so long? The middle-aged man kept running, but ultimately, he was silently cursing the black giant python behind him. He had spent several days being chased by this black giant python, and the team he had brought out had continuously perished trying to help him escape the black giant python's pursuit. Now, only he remained. Just as the black giant python rapidly lunged toward the middle-aged man, a silver light streaked across the sky. The next second, this silver light directly struck the black giant python's body. This forced the black giant python to stop. The silver light also revealed its true form. A silver spear was embedded exactly between the black giant python and the middle-aged man. At this moment, a terrifying pressure emanated from the air. Then, a young man wearing white battle armor slowly descended from the sky, his toes gently resting on the shaft of the long spear. His eyes gazed deeply at the black giant python before him. This person was none other than Zhao Zilong, who had rushed over. Seeing that the black giant python was about to attack the middle-aged man, he immediately chose to intervene. What a handsome entrance! It rivals this prince's appearance on the battlefield back in the day. The middle-aged man stopped running when he saw someone save him, then internally slandered the man wearing the silver battle armor. The black giant python seemed to sense the chi emanating from Zhao Zilong at this moment, and it opened its massive, bloody mouth and roared toward Zhao Zilong, seemingly trying to scare him away. A beast is just a beast. It lacks even this basic insight, Zhao Zilong said calmly, looking at the black giant python that hadn't fled. Then, he slowly picked up the dragon gallbladder bright silver spear from the ground and thrust it directly toward the black giant python. At this moment, Zhao Zilong did not use his martial skill. Instead, he delivered a plain, unremarkable thrust of the spear. However, the power contained within this single thrust far exceeded the black giant python's imagination. When the black giant python saw the spear thrusting toward it, it tried to dodge. But how could Zhao Zilong's spear thrust be so simple? The long spear plunged directly into the black giant python's flesh without any resistance, leaving a deep mark on the black giant python's body. Roar! Feeling the pain transmitted from its body, the black giant python roared, and then its huge tail slapped toward Zhao Zilong. Facing this massive tail, Zhao Zilong did not choose to dodge. He leaped up and struck the black giant python's tail with a palm. The next moment, the black giant python was sent flying several hundred feet away by this powerful force. Zhao Zilong felt helpless when he sensed the black giant python's strength. He had not expected this black giant python to be so weak. Therefore, Zhao Zilong did not intend to continue fighting the giant python. The dragon gallbladder bright silver spear in his hand flew out immediately, and the next second, the dragon gallbladder bright silver spear directly pierced the black giant python's vital spot. Sensing the approach of death, the black giant python struggled symbolically a few times before collapsing onto the ground. After completing all this, Zhao Zilong gently waved his hand, and the dragon gallbladder bright silver spear reappeared in his grasp. He lightly flicked the blood off the dragon gallbladder bright silver spear before slowly turning his gaze toward the middle-aged man before him. The middle-aged man before him possessed an air of nobility and killing intent. Clearly, this person had always held a high position, and he had killed many soldiers on the battlefield. Of course, what caught Zhao Zilong's attention even more was that the middle-aged man's face bore a 3/10 resemblance to his young master. Thank you, brave warrior, for saving me. Otherwise, this prince might have perished here. The middle-aged man finally reacted and slowly spoke to Zhao Zilong, his eyes filled with admiration. Oh, isn't this Prince of Jinbei? You actually have such a miserable day too. The moment the middle-aged man's voice fell, a teasing voice suddenly came from behind him. The middle-aged man's face instantly lit up with surprise upon hearing the loud voice. But he immediately suppressed the look of pleasant surprise and turned around with a dignified expression to look behind him. Chapter 32 Mutual Banter. Chu Tianxiong's goddaughter, Luo Qingyan. Seeing that the person appearing behind him was indeed the one he had thought of, the Prince of Jinbei walked towards Chu Fan with a serious expression. You brat, who told you to come here? Don't you know how dangerous it is here? That's right, this middle-aged man was none other than the Prince of Jinbei, Chu Tianxiong. He walked up to Chu Fan and spoke to him with a stern expression. However, the heartache and worry in his eyes remained undiminished. Old man, if I hadn't come, you might not have made it back. Chu Fan looked at Chu Tianxiong in front of him with a hint of helplessness. Although his father loved him very much, he was afraid that Chu Fan would go astray, so he always maintained a very strict demeanor towards him. Nonsense! Your prince father is the Grand Marshal of the Northern Territory. What can a small meteor dragon mountain range do to me? Chu Tianxiong seemed to have been touched on a sore spot by Chu Fan's words. He waved his hand awkwardly and said, Is that so? I should have let Zilong save you a little later. Seeing his father's embarrassment, Chu Fan showed no mercy. He continued to speak bluntly. Brat, you said he's your subordinate? Chu Tianxiong also reacted at this moment, looking at Chu Fan and Zhao Zilong in the distance with an incredulous expression. He had not expected this powerful expert, who seemed to be in the Dharma aspect realm, to be his son's subordinate. That's right, Zilong is indeed my subordinate. What about it? Chu Fan looked at Chu Tianxiong playfully. It could be said that Chu Tianxiong was the easiest person to get along with since his transmigration. After all, Chu Tianxiong and Chu Fan's interactions had always been like this. The relationship between the father and son could be said to be very good. You're so disrespectful. I'm your prince father. Aren't you going to introduce these people around you to your prince father? Chu Tianxiong also reacted at this moment, then rolled his eyes at his son and looked at the people behind him. This is Shangguan Qingcheng. I'm sure you've heard her name, old man. Chu Fan also followed his father's gaze, then pointed to Shangguan Qingcheng beside him and said. Chu Tianxiong nodded after hearing his son's words, but he still frowned at the mention of Shangguan Qingcheng's name. After all, Shangguan Qingcheng's reputation was not very good, and having her by his son's side might not necessarily be a good thing. This humble one, Shangguan Qingcheng, greets the Prince of Jinbei. At this moment, Shangguan Qingcheng naturally recognized the Prince of Jinbei, Chu Tianxiong. She slowly stepped forward and bowed to Chu Tianxiong. Chu Tianxiong nodded at the charming Shangguan Qingcheng in front of him. Although Shangguan Qingcheng's reputation was not great, as long as she was with his son, he naturally couldn't let his son lose face. This is Miss Luo Tianyi from the Divine Elephant Sect. Seeing that his father and Shangguan Qingcheng hadn't spoken, Chu Fan turned his gaze to Luo Tianyi beside him and said, Tianyi greets the Prince of Jinbei. Upon hearing Chu Fan's words, Luo Tianyi also bowed to Chu Tianxiong and said. Chu Tianxiong nodded at Luo Tianyi after hearing her words, then turned his gaze to Luo Qingyun in Chu Fan's arms, with a playful look in his eyes. Old man, what's with that expression? This little girl is Miss Luo's younger sister, and now she's also my adopted sister, your adopted daughter. Seeing the playful look in Chu Tianxiong's eyes, Chu Fan helplessly rolled his eyes at Chu Tianxiong, then slowly began to explain. Qingyun, this is your godfather. Go on, say hello. After explaining to Chu Tianxiong, Chu Fan spoke softly to Luo Qingyun, his voice filled with gentleness. Godfather. Upon hearing Chu Fan's words, Luo Qingyun slowly poked out her small head and cautiously spoke to Chu Tianxiong. Ha ha ha, I never thought I, Chu Tianxiong, would have an adopted daughter. Come, this is a welcoming gift from your godfather. Upon hearing Luo Qingyun's childish voice, Chu Tianxiong burst into laughter. Then, he fumbled through a storage ring and pulled out an exquisite, delicate flying sword, placing it into Luo Qingyun's hand. Chu Tianxiong had always wanted a daughter over the years, but being away fighting battles, he had no time. Now, upon learning that he had such a lovely adopted daughter, he was naturally overjoyed. Thank you, godfather. Seeing Chu Tianxiong's face, which bore some resemblance to Chu Fan's, Luo Qingyun wasn't too scared. She reached out her small, jade-like hand to take the flying sword. From now on, call me Prince Father, just like this brat. Chu Tianxiong was very pleased to hear Luo Qingyun's words, so he pointed at Chu Fan and said. After Chu Fan and the others chatted for a while, seeing that it was getting dark, they decided to set up camp there. Dian Wei and Su Chu, those two gourmands, immediately took the black giant python to roast. Brat, this is something I found in the Meteor Dragon Mountain range. I heard it can change a cultivator's talent. See if it's useful for you. As night fell, Chu Tianxiong came to Chu Fan's side and handed him the spiritual milk he had collected, his eyes full of affection. Thank you, old man, but I no longer need it. Chu Fan felt a warmth in his heart as he saw the affection in his father's eyes. Then, he slowly spoke to Chu Tianxiong, simultaneously releasing the aura of his Grotto Heaven Realm. You brat, you actually broke through to the Grotto Heaven Realm. Chu Tianxiong was shocked when he felt the aura from Chu Fan. He hadn't expected his son to break through to the Grotto Heaven Realm after only a few years of his absence. That's right. I awakened the Innate Dao Body a year ago, so breaking through to the Grotto Heaven Realm now is perfectly normal. Facing his father's shock, Chu Fan casually made an excuse. Of course, awakening the Innate Dao Body was true, but he also had the assistance of top-tier Emperor-grade cultivation technique to break through to the Grotto Heaven Realm so quickly. As expected of my son, no wonder the old man let you leave the prince of Zhenbei's estate. Chu Tianxiong said proudly after hearing his son's words. Grandpa didn't let me leave the prince of Zhenbei's estate because of my strength. Grandpa probably doesn't know that my strength has already reached the Grotto Heaven Realm. Chu Fan naturally knew what Chu Tianxiong meant, so he shook his head and said, Young master, the meat is ready. Just as Chu Tianxiong was about to say something, Old Huang walked up to Chu Fan and said fawningly. At the same time, many grease stains could be seen at the corners of his mouth, clearly indicating that Old Huang had already eaten a lot. Old man, I know you have many questions, but for now, let's eat first. Chu Fan glanced at Old Huang before speaking to Chu Tianxiong. After speaking, he carried Qing Yun and walked towards the others. Chapter 33. Everyone's cultivation level improved, and news came from the Luo Wang, net of heaven. That brat. Chu Tianxiong couldn't help but murmur to himself as he saw Chu Fan's back. However, he was overjoyed to see Chu Fan maturing. He then followed Chu Fan's steps and joined the others, beginning to devour the meat heartily. It had to be said that the meat quality of this black giant python was excellent, and it contained a significant amount of spiritual power. Chu Tianxiong's cultivation, originally at the Grotto Heaven Realm late stage, instantly reached the Grotto Heaven Realm perfection after consuming the meat of this black giant python. Luo Tianyi also used the quality of the black giant python's meat to achieve a breakthrough to the Meridian Opening Realm. Shangguan Qingqing's strength also reached the Grotto Heaven Realm late stage, but the strength of Dianwei and the others did not increase, as their cultivation was already high, making further advancement difficult. The one who likely saw the greatest improvement was Chu Fan. Because he possessed the heaven-swallowing demonic art, his cultivation reached the Grotto Heaven Realm middle stage after finishing the black giant python. One must remember that his cultivation had just achieved a breakthrough to the Grotto Heaven Realm early stage. This giant python not only stabilized his cultivation, but also allowed him to break through a minor realm. Protected by the system, Chu Fan's cultivation breakthrough was unknown to the others. Just as everyone finished eating and planned to enjoy the moon, a Grotto Heaven Realm man in black appeared before them. This Grotto Heaven Realm man in black quickly approached Chu Fan and immediately bowed to him. Speak. What intelligence do you have? Chu Fan naturally understood the identity of the man in black before him, so he questioned him. Reporting to young master, the king of Jinshi is leading 10,000 golden tiger cavalry and 4 spirit roaming realm experts, waiting for young master to appear in the monster beast mountain range. They plan to use this to ambush young master. This man in black was naturally a member of the net of Luo. He slowly relayed the intelligence to Chu Fan. Go and monitor their every movement. Report back to me if there is any disturbance. Chu Fan hadn't expected the king of Jinshi to deploy 10,000 golden tiger cavalry, but he wasn't worried. Instead, he calmly waved his hand at the Luo Wang expert. This net of Luo man in black instantly vanished into the night sky upon hearing Chu Fan's words. Brat, how did you provoke that guy? The king of Jinshi? The conversation between Chu Fan and the man in black was naturally overheard by Chu Tianxiong and the others. Chu Tianxiong slowly stepped forward and questioned Chu Fan, his eyes filled with worry. It was nothing much. I just killed his youngest son. Chu Fan spoke calmly to Chu Tianxiong, but the news he revealed utterly shocked Chu Tianxiong. You said you killed his youngest son? I heard that guy Morong Ci dotes on his youngest son the most. I knew there had to be a reason why he mobilized 10,000 golden tiger cavalry. Chu Tianxiong only spoke after being stunned for a good while, and the deep worry in his eyes became even more difficult to erase. What's that? I also killed the general guarding Tianguan City and 30,000 iron cavalry in the Monster Beast Mountain Range. I presume that is the true reason the king of Jinshi wants to keep me here. Seeing the shock in his father's eyes, Chu Fan continued by dropping even more shocking news on Chu Tianxiong. Brat, how did you manage to kill those 30,000 iron cavalry in a monster beast mountain range? Chu Tianxiong only reacted after a long while, looking at Chu Fan with great curiosity as he asked. I have a mysterious force under my command. Defeating them is effortless. Chu Fan smiled mysteriously at Chu Tianxiong. Zilong, Lu Bu, the two of you go and kill a few Dharma Aspect Realm Yao beasts and bring them back. I haven't eaten a Dharma Aspect Realm Yao beast yet. After Chu Fan finished speaking, he turned back to look at Lu Bu and Zhao Zilong, his eyes filled with anticipation. Upon hearing Chu Fan's command, Lu Bu and Zhao Zilong immediately turned into two streaks of light and vanished into the horizon. Not long after the two left, bursts of earth-shattering roars from Yao beasts echoed through the mountain range, and the entire area began to stir restlessly. Lu Bu and Zhao Zilong were like two bandits, constantly searching for and killing those Dharma Aspect Realm Yao beasts. It wasn't until the sky was about to brighten that Lu Bu and Zhao Zilong returned to Chu Fan and the others, covered in blood. At this time, both men were stained red with Yao beast blood. The white cloak behind Zhao Zilong had already been dyed into a red cloak. However, Chu Fan and the others were resting at this time, and the return of Zilong and Lu Bu only drew the attention of Old Huang, Dian Wei, and Su Chu. The three, knowing that Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu had returned, were not overly surprised and continued to rest. As the skies slowly brightened, Chu Fan and the others woke up from their dreams. Chu Fan was not too surprised to see Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu return. Moreover, the blood on Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu had already been washed off, so the two did not look like they had just gone through a major battle. However, Chu Tianxiong and the others could still sense a powerful aura of slaughter emanating from the two. Clearly, they had just experienced a fierce battle. Zilong, lead the White Horse volunteers and clear the path. Chu Fan had already achieved the goal of this trip, so it was time to return. Thus, he spoke to Zhao Zilong. Zilong obeys. Zilong also wants to see if the rumored Golden Tiger cavalry is truly as powerful as the legends claim. After Zhao Zilong heard Chu Fan's words, a flash of battle intent appeared in his eyes. Even Lu Bu, standing nearby, had eyes filled with unprecedented battle intent, and he looked eager to try his hand. Lu Bu, don't worry. Soon you and the Bingzhou Iron Cavalry will also have a chance to strike. That will be the time to truly showcase the prowess of you and the Bingzhou Iron Cavalry. Chu Fan naturally saw the eagerness in Lu Bu's eyes, so he looked toward Lu Bu and reassured him. Young master, rest assured, I and the Bingzhou Iron Cavalry will never disappoint young master. As for Chu Tianxiong, he was staring curiously at Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu. At this moment, he understood that both Lu Bu and Zhao Zilong were Dharma Aspect Realm existences, making him even more curious about Zhao Zilong's White Horse Volunteers and Lu Bu's Bingzhou Iron Cavalry. He had never heard of either Zhao Zilong's White Horse Volunteers or Lu Bu's Bingzhou Iron Cavalry, and these two were experts accompanying his own son, which was what Chu Tianxiong was most curious about. Although his own son had reached the Grotto Heaven Realm, he never expected that his son would have two Dharma Aspect Realm existences by his side. One must know that even the Prince of Jinbei's estate did not possess any Dharma Aspect Realm existences. Chapter 34 The White Horse Cavalry reappears. Dian Wei and Su Chu lead the vanguard. Just like that, Zhao Zilong rode his white horse, leading 3,000 White Horse volunteers to the front to meet the enemy. Chu Tianxiong, curious about the army his son commanded, also rushed forward impatiently. Chu Fan naturally wanted to see how powerful the White Horse volunteers truly were in this world, so he also quickened his pace. Their group wasn't far behind Zhao Zilong, and soon the third day arrived. After 3 days of travel, Chu Fan and the others finally reached the Monster Beast Mountain Range. Standing before Chu Fan and the others at this moment were Zhao Zilong and a magnificent army, an army that resembled heavenly gods descending from the snowy peaks. Seeing this scene, Chu Tianxiong's eyes were filled with even more surprise. Even their Prince of Jinbei's estate didn't possess such an army. Chu Tianxiong was certain that this army was the strongest in the entire Great Yin. Chu Tianxiong never would have imagined that his son actually had such a formidable army. If the number of this army reached a certain level, then it could sweep across the entire Great Yin dynasty. It's just that the number of this army is too small right now. If there were more of them, it would be perfect. However, what Chu Tianxiong didn't know was that such an army wasn't even the strongest in the long river of Huaxia's history. Not to mention that Chu Fan possessed a system and could even summon heavenly soldiers and generals from the heavenly court. Young master, Zilong originally intended to attack, but decided to leave the western region with you instead. Otherwise, after we deal with this army in front of us, the West Town King's estate might dispatch other large armies, and it would be difficult to get out then. After seeing Chu Fan arrive, Zhao Zilong dismounted and slowly expressed his concerns to Chu Fan. Chu Fan nodded after hearing Zhao Zilong's words, and, at the same time, he realized the problem with the decision he had made earlier. If Zhao Zilong had truly led the White Horse Volunteers to deal with these armies in advance, it would certainly attract the attention of the entire West Town King's estate, and then it would be difficult for them to break out with just these 3,000 White Horse Volunteers. At this moment, Chu Fan couldn't help but admire Zhao Zilong. He truly lived up to his reputation as an all-rounder general from the Three Kingdoms. Even Chu Tianxiong, standing beside Chu Fan, couldn't help but nod after hearing Zhao Zilong's words. At this moment, he also realized that Zhao Zilong's talent was in no way inferior to those generals who had commanded for a long time. As for Shangwan Qingsheng, she looked at Chu Fan with a surprised gaze. She had heard of the Prince of Jinbei's heir, but she never expected Chu Fan, the Prince of Jinbei's heir, to give her such a great surprise. Not only does he have two presumed Dharma aspect realm existences by his side, but these two also seem to be born commanders. Now, there is even an unmatched army before them, which makes her even more interested in Chu Fan. Meanwhile, Luo Tianyi looked at Chu Fan with an expression of adoration. From the moment she met Chu Fan until now, Luo Tianyi felt that Chu Fan was not at all like the legends described. Instead, she found Chu Fan to be very mysterious, giving her the illusion that even the Great Yin Dynasty was no match for Chu Fan. Since that's the case, let's break through together. Let the entire Great Yin Dynasty know the might of my White Horse Volunteers. Chu Fan looked at Zhao Zilong in front of him and slowly spoke, his eyes filled with excitement. After summoning Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu, Chu Fan no longer feared the Great Yin Dynasty, especially with an old man in the late Dharma aspect stage by his side. It could be said that Chu Fan was now unafraid of any force in the eastern region. He even no longer feared the strongest imperial dynasty in the eastern region. Dianwei, Su Chu, you two will be the vanguard of the White Horse Volunteers. Looking at the perfectly aligned White Horse Volunteers in front of him, Chu Fan then turned his gaze to the eager Dianwei and Su Chu. Since his side was very safe, having these two top experts serve as the vanguard was also a good choice. We obey your command. Upon hearing Chu Fan's words, a sharp glint appeared in their eyes. Then, the two of them, holding their weapons and riding their war horses, directly moved to the front of the White Horse Volunteers. Zhao Zilong, seeing this scene, immediately issued the command to charge to the White Horse Volunteers. Then, this vast expanse of white galloped towards the bottom of the Monster Beast Mountain Range. At the bottom of the Monster Beast Mountain Range, however, there was a golden wall. This golden wall was formed by the Golden Tiger Cavalry of the Western region, who had been waiting here for several days. Murong Ci believed that as long as they kept waiting here, they would eventually await the arrival of Chu Fan and the others. At this moment, Murong Ci was waiting behind the Golden Tiger Cavalry for news from the front. However, just then, Murong Ci felt a series of hoofbeats, and at the same time, the ground beneath him began to tremble, as if something extraordinary had appeared. Feeling this, Murong Ci quickly walked out of his tent, and then witnessed the most unforgettable scene of his life. A vast white army appeared from within the Monster Beast Mountain Range. Although this white army was not numerous, the aura it exuded made him feel somewhat horrified. At the same time, the chi emanating from the two black dots at the very front of this army made him feel as if life had stopped at that moment. Everyone defend. Stop this army. Murong Ci reacted in an instant, and then he issued orders to the Golden Tiger Cavalry in front. His voice quickly spread throughout the entire Golden Tiger Cavalry. The Golden Tiger Cavalry, who had been momentarily dazed by the scene before them, fully recovered. They quickly adjusted their formation and then looked solemnly at the army charging towards them. This was also the strongest army in the Western region, the Golden Tiger Cavalry. Otherwise, even a slightly powerful ordinary army would not have been able to adjust their state in such a short time. At the same time, for cultivators exuding the aura of the spirit roaming realm also stood out beside Murong Ci, their eyes fixed with solemnity on the two black dots at the front of the White Horse Volunteers. Two late Shenyu realm experts. It seems the Prince of Jinbei's estate, who made a move this time, is not as simple as we imagined. A late Shenyu realm expert looked at the two black dots and couldn't help but sigh softly. Although their strength is considerable, they won't escape from our hands. Another person's eyes were also filled with solemnity, but then they were filled with more excitement. A heavenly halberd, taller than his entire body, appeared in his hand. He looked with battle intent at the two black dots and the White Horse Volunteers charging towards them. Chapter 35, The Great War Arrives, Guo Jia's Plan. Just as the two armies were about to clash, the carriage carrying Chu Fan and the others in the rear proceeded without hesitation, following the White Horse Volunteers forward. Their carriage appeared insignificant before the two armies, yet their movements did not escape Murongxi's notice. Murongxi, standing at the front of the massive army, suddenly fixed his gaze intensely upon Chu Fan and Chu Tianxiong. It seems that fellow has noticed the two of us, but the current him is no match for this prince. Chu Tianxiong naturally spotted Murongxi within the golden formation at a glance, and he spoke toward Murongxi's direction with a look of disdain. Chu Tianxiong and Murongxi were geniuses of the same era, and since Chu Tianxiong's talent had always surpassed Murongxi's during that time, his strength had consistently suppressed Murongxi. Even after Murongxi received extensive nurturing from the great Yan Imperial Dynasty, he still failed to surpass Chu Tianxiong. However, the gap between Chu Tianxiong and Murongxi was not large. For example, Murongxi's cultivation has also reached the cave heaven middle stage. This is the Murongxi who has always been suppressed by father. After hearing Chu Tianxiong's words, Chu Fan also looked toward Murongxi within the golden formation, then turned back curiously to ask Chu Tianxiong. That's right, it's this fellow. Every time I defeat him, he puts down harsh words. Later, tell your subordinates not to kill him. I want to meet him again. Chu Tianxiong spoke proudly after hearing his son's words, and, at the same time, he spoke to Chu Fan with some excitement. While Chu Tianxiong referred to himself as this prince when speaking to others, he always referred to himself as I in front of his own son. All right, then I'll leave him to father later. Chu Fan immediately agreed to Chu Tianxiong's request, then lightly glanced at Lu Bu beside him. Upon seeing his young master's gaze, Lu Bu excitedly rode his warhorse directly towards the direction of the battle. He had long been unable to hold back. Having now received approval from his young master, he naturally rode out on his warhorse impatiently. Young master, perhaps we can use this opportunity to take the entire western region. After all, young master's ultimate goal is the great Yan Imperial Dynasty. Just after Lu Bu rode out on his warhorse, Guojia's voice slowly sounded beside Chu Fan's ear. Guojia's courtesy name, what plan do you have? Chu Fan asked Guojia curiously after hearing his words. Young master, your subordinate has heard that the old king of Jinshi dotes heavily on Murongxi, and the old king of Jinshi only has this one son, Murongxi. What do you think the old king of Jinshi would do if young master slays him and brings his head to Kaiyuan City? Guojia spoke slowly while looking at Chu Fan, a sparkle flashing in his eyes. If we really do that, then given that old fellow's temper, he will definitely mobilize hundreds of thousands of troops from the western region to attack Kaiyuan City. Before Chu Fan could speak, Chu Tianxiong, standing beside him, stepped forward and spoke, though he was still somewhat confused at this moment. After all, although Kaiyuan City is located at the border between the western region and the northern region, the city does not belong to either. Therefore, even if Chu Fan and the others enter Kaiyuan City, they cannot withstand the hundreds of thousands of troops from the western region. Guojia's courtesy name. Do you mean you want me to capture Kaiyuan City first, and then use its natural defenses to resist the western region army? After hearing Guojia's words, Chu Fan understood a little and began questioning Guojia. We must indeed capture Kaiyuan City in advance, because if we go to any other city, the old king of Jinshi would never fall for it. But in Kaiyuan City, he will relax his vigilance. After all, Kaiyuan City does not belong to the West Town King's estate or the Prince of Jinbei's estate. At that time, he will be fully confident in surrounding the entire Kaiyuan City. We only need to pay attention to the military movements of the Prince of Jinbei's estate. In the eyes of the old king of Jinshi, we will be turtles in a jar. Therefore, the old king of Jinshi will definitely choose to besiege us in Kaiyuan City. But what if Kaiyuan City is captured by us in advance? At that time, we can rely on the army in young master's hands to resist the old king of Jinshi's attack, while the Prince of Jinbei's estate can dispatch troops to seize the western region. How could the western region, without military protection, be a match for the Prince of Jinbei's great army? Guojia slowly stepped forward and spoke after hearing Chu Fan's words. At this moment, he seemed like an invisible great hand, directly deciding the fate of the western region. Father, if we can lure the old king of Jinshi and hundreds of thousands of troops from the western region to Kaiyuan City, can you lead the Jinbei army to take the western region? Chu Fan did not immediately agree to the plan after hearing Guojia's words. Instead, he turned his head to ask Chu Tianxiong. Yes, but what basis do we have to lure the hundreds of thousands of Jinshi army from the West Town King's estate to Kaiyuan City? Chu Tianxiong initially thought this plan was wishful thinking, but after recalling that Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu's strength had already reached the Dharma aspect realm, he felt the plan could be executed. However, what confused him now was how to lure the old king of Jinshi and the hundreds of thousands of Jinshi army to Kaiyuan City. Has your highness forgotten that both his highness and the heir are currently here? If his highness and the heir enter Kaiyuan City simultaneously. Would the old king of Jinshi still hesitate? After all, Kaiyuan City will contain not only Murong Si's head, but also his highness and the heir. Even if the old king of Jinshi suspects a trap, he absolutely won't let go of such a good opportunity. Guo Jia spoke slowly after hearing Chu Tianxiong's words, and, at this moment, he had completely grasped the psychology of others. Guo Jia's courtesy name, you are using me as bait. Chu Fan instantly understood after hearing Guo Jia's words, so he spoke to Guo Jia with a smile. At the same time, Chu Fan had almost agreed to the plan. How long will it take us to capture Kaiyuan City? Chu Tianxiong naturally understood Guo Jia's meaning at this point, so he voiced his final concern. 3 days at most. With the net of Luo and Lu Bu's Bingzhou iron cavalry, 3 days is enough. Guo Jia spoke with full confidence. I'll leave the decision of this matter to you. After all, the entire Prince of Jinbei's estate will be handed over to you eventually. Chu Tianxiong looked at the confident Guo Jia with interest, but he still spoke to Chu Fan, his face filled with emotion at the same time. He hadn't expected that his own son would grow to this extent after he had only been away for a few years. Now it was time for him to relinquish authority. After all, Chu Tianxiong never cared much for power. Controlling the entire northern region was merely to protect his son. Since Chu Fan was now so outstanding, how could he not feel at ease? Chapter 36: The Advantages of Lu Bu and Zhao Zilong, and Shangguan Qingqing's thoughts. Alright, after this great battle, Lu Bu will cooperate with the net of Luo to take Kaiyuan City. As for us and the 3,000 White Horse volunteers, we will buy time for Lu Bu in the western region. Chu Fan, seeing that his father Chu Tianxiong had handed over all authority to him, immediately made a decision. After all, he naturally wouldn't miss such a good opportunity. Otherwise, he didn't know how much military strength would be required to take the western region again in the future. Just as Chu Fan made his decision, the two armies below also engaged in battle. Dianwei and Su Chu, like fierce tigers descending from the mountain, directly tore open a gap in the Golden Tiger cavalry in front of them, and the two directly charged in, weapons in hand. Instantly, a large empty space appeared around the two of them, and numerous Golden Tiger cavalry lay around them. The 4 spirit roaming realm experts beside Murong Si did not intend to let Dianwei and Su Chu continue their slaughter like this. They all stepped onto the battlefield, came to Su Chu and Dianwei's side, and began to battle the two. However, just as they stopped the two, a man in a 100-flower battle robe, wielding a heavenly halberd, directly charged in. With every swing of his heavenly halberd, hundreds of the Golden Tiger cavalry in front of him instantly fell. At this moment, the White Horse volunteers from the rear also followed their lead and charged into the Golden Tiger cavalry. With Lu Bu, a Dharma aspect Rel vanguard, Zhao Zilong did not rush in, but instead directed the White Horse volunteers' attack from outside. And his command was very effective. The White Horse volunteers constantly weaved through the chaotic ranks. Although the Golden Tiger cavalry were initially thrown into disarray, they were slowly recovering. Their strength, while somewhat weak compared to the White Horse volunteers, was enough to withstand the White Horse volunteers' charge at this moment. However, their casualties were continuously increasing. Besides Lu Bu, a Dharma aspect realm expert, the White Horse volunteer strength was not to be underestimated. Moreover, there were Spirit Roaming Realm and Grotto Heaven Realm generals within the White Horse Volunteers' ranks. The battle continued relentlessly, and the number of Golden Tiger cavalry was constantly dwindling. Murong Si's heart bled at the sight of this. It should be known that the Golden Tiger cavalry was the most solid backing of the entire West Town King's estate, and also the strongest army in the entire western region, numbering only 20,000. It could be said that every Golden Tiger cavalry was a treasure of the western region, and now, in just a short moment, several thousand have fallen. How could Murong Si bear this? Murong Si quickly commanded the Golden Tiger cavalry to change their formation, hoping to encircle the White Horse volunteers. But how could his actions escape Zhao Zilong's notice? A disdainful smile appeared in Zhao Zilong's eyes. White Horse volunteers, go straight for the commander's banner. Zhao Zilong looked in Murong Si's direction and loudly gave the order to the White Horse volunteers. Then, all the White Horse volunteers gathered in the center and charged directly towards Murong Si's position. At this moment, they were unstoppable. Even the strongest army in the western region, the Golden Tiger cavalry, seemed somewhat weak before them. Lu Bu displayed divine might, tearing a huge gap directly in front of him, and he himself, heavenly halberd in hand, continuously slaughtered the Golden Tiger cavalry in front of him. This scene was naturally observed by Chu Fan and the others above. Brat, how did you cultivate such a powerful and invincible army? I'm afraid only the Imperial family's Golden Dragon cavalry and the entire Great Yin can contend with them. Chu Tianxiong said with fervent eyes as he watched the White Horse Volunteers' display of divine might. As for the Golden Dragon Cavalry, he mentioned it was the strongest army of the great Yan imperial family. The Golden Tiger Cavalry below was founded in imitation of the Golden Dragon Cavalry. Father, who do you think is more powerful, Zhao Zilong or Lu Bu? Chu Fan did not explain the origin of the White Horse Volunteers. Instead, he asked Chu Tianxiong beside him, his eyes still fixed on Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu below. Both of them are first-rate generals, but I favor Zhao Zilong more. After all, he possesses command abilities that Lu Bu lacks. Lu Bu is unrivaled as a vanguard, but I don't understand his command abilities. However, seeing the situation below, I think Lu Bu's command ability shouldn't be strong. He leans more towards leading by example. After hearing Chu Fan's words, Chu Tianxiong also fixed his gaze on Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu. After watching them for a while, Chu Tianxiong slowly spoke. However, his eyes were also filled with admiration for Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu. After all, such generals were rare in the world, and now the entire Prince of Jinbei's estate could possess two simultaneously. But in Chu Tianxiong's eyes, Zhao Zilong was suitable for commanding battles, while Lu Bu was suitable as a vanguard. If the two cooperated well, then it could be said that with their combined abilities, they could sweep across the entire world. Indeed, Zilong seems a bit more steady, perfectly suited to command the three armies. Lu Bu, however, is a bit impulsive, but his strength is more than sufficient to be a vanguard general. If he were given an invincible army, what kind of army could withstand his attack? Chu Fan naturally knew the talents of Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu, so he slowly spoke, combining history with their current situation. At the same time, Chu Fan was also looking forward to the scene of Lu Bu leading the Bingzhou Iron Cavalry. It should be known that Lu Bu was called the god of war of Bingzhou in the romance, and he was also the only general in the Three Kingdoms who could make it seem normal for a group of generals to surround and attack him. As for Zhao Zilong, he was an even more extraordinary existence in the romance. It could be said that Zhao Zilong was a six-dimensional warrior in the romance. What Chu Fan liked most about him was the scene where he entered and exited Changban Slope 7 times to rescue Adu. Of course, that was also Zhao Zilong's peak moment, but since Zhao Zilong had been summoned to this world by him, Chu Fan naturally had to maximize the advantages of Zhao Zilong, Lu Bu, and the others. Such an army would be considered invincible even in the Tianqing dynasty. I really don't know how this guy cultivated such a powerful army. Shangwan Qingsheng, on the side, stared at the army below with a shocked expression, secretly thinking to herself. She had seen the armies of the Tianqing dynasty, but she had never seen such a powerful army. At this moment, her mind was constantly pondering. During her time with Chu Fan, Shangwan Qingsheng had come to understand Chu Fan's ambition. For some reason, she had a thought. Perhaps this young man in front of her could become the master of the Great Yan dynasty, or even the master of the entire eastern region. Chapter 37. The battle ends, Murong Ci perishes, and the old king of Jinshi is enraged. The battle proceeded quickly, with Lu Bu, a powerful expert of the Dharma aspect realm, clearing the path. The White Horse Volunteers directly slaughtered the Golden Tiger Cavalry ahead. When Chu Fan and the others arrived at the battlefield, the battle was already reaching its conclusion. Lu Bu directly captured Murong Ci and brought him back, while Dianwei and the other person directly slaughtered all of their opponents. After all, the cultivation of the two of them had already reached the spirit roaming realm, and furthermore, they had reached the pinnacle of the spirit roaming realm, which is the Shenyu perfect realm. Therefore, when facing 4 cultivators of the spirit roaming realm, they easily killed all 4 of them. At this time, Zhao Zilong was leading the White Horse Volunteers in constantly clearing the battlefield. Although the Golden Tiger Cavalry had all been killed, their equipment was extremely valuable. It was not easy to train a unit of Golden Tiger Cavalry like this, so the White Horse Volunteers naturally would not pass up this equipment. As for Murong Ci, who had just been full of vigor, he now stared blankly at the ruined battlefield. He had not expected that in just a moment, the entire battle would end in their defeat, and that the proudest army of their West Town King's estate would be defeated so thoroughly by the enemy. More importantly, the enemy achieved a victory of the few over the many, slaughtering them unilaterally. Murong Ci, long time no see. I didn't expect the next time I saw you, you would already be a prisoner. Chu Tianxiong looked at Murong Ci before him and spoke slowly. Regarding Murong Ci, Chu Tianxiong's eyes were filled mostly with emotion. After all, although Murong Ci had always been defeated by him, the former Murong Ci was still a prodigy, but he never thought he would fall to such a state today. Chu Tianxiong, I also didn't expect to meet you here. But do you think you can leave the western border? After Murong Ci heard Chu Tianxiong's words, the blank look in his eyes finally cleared, and he spoke, staring madly at Chu Tianxiong. Whether we can leave the western border is not up to you, But do you think you can still live? Chu Tianxiong looked at his old opponent before him, sighed with emotion, and spoke, his expression full of mockery. Chu Tianxiong, if you use my life to threaten my father, you still have a chance to leave the western border. But if you kill me, you and your son will have no chance of leaving the western border. Murong Ci replied very confidently after hearing Chu Tianxiong's words, and there was no worry in his eyes. After all, the best choice for Chu Tianxiong and the others right now was to use his life to threaten the old king of Jinshi. In that case, perhaps his face would be lost, but he would definitely survive. Ha ha! Why would I, Chu Tianxiong, need to use your life to threaten the old king of Jinshi just to leave the western border? When Chu Tianxiong heard Murong Ci's words, he couldn't help but burst into laughter. If it had been at the very beginning, perhaps he really would have used Murong Ci's life to threaten the old king of Jinshi. But now that he knew his son had a plan, he naturally could not make that most helpless choice. Moreover, Chu Tianxiong also wanted to go crazy with his son. If they could really take the western border this time, then the Prince of Jinbei's estate would no longer need to fear any power in the entire Great Yin. After all, the entire Great Yin is divided into 5 regions. Besides the 4 borders of east, south, west, and north, there's also the interior occupied by the Great Yin imperial family, which is called the Central Region. As long as the Prince of Jinbei's estate takes the western border this time, then 2/5 of the entire Great Yan's territory will be under the rule of the Prince of Jinbei's estate. Then, under Murong Ci's shocked gaze, Chu Tianxiong directly severed his head with a single slash, and then calmly wiped the blood from the long blade in his hand. Lu Bu, I now order you to lead 10,000 Bingzhou iron cavalry and take Kaiyuan City within 7 days. This heir apparent will buy you these 7 days. After seeing that his father had dealt with Murong Ci, Chu Fan immediately walked up to Lu Bu and spoke to him. As for why he gave Lu Bu 7 days, it was naturally to give Lu Bu a few extra days for the journey. Otherwise, 3 days might not even be enough time for Lu Bu to travel. This subordinate obeys the order, but will definitely take Kaiyuan City in the shortest possible time. After hearing Chu Fan's order, Lu Bu replied excitedly to Chu Fan. Then he mounted the red hare horse, held his heavenly halberd, and galloped directly toward Kaiyuan City. As for Chu Fan and the others, they led the white horse volunteers unhurriedly through the western border. They traveled openly through the western border, and in just 1 day, the western border had already noticed them. During this time, Chu Fan also wrote his plan into a letter and handed it to the net of Luo, asking the net of Luo to deliver it to the Prince of Jinbei's estate. What did you say? Ci is dead, and he died at the hands of that little beast, Chu Fan? In the West Town King's estate, a burly old man stared at his subordinate in shock after hearing the report, while an expression of intense fury appeared on his face. Reporting to the old king, not only did the king fall to Chu Fan's hands, but the young heir apparent also fell to Chu Fan's hands. The king went to seek revenge on Chu Fan this time, which is why he fell to Chu Fan's hands. The subordinate below continued speaking after hearing the old king of Jinshi's words. A tremor could be heard in his voice, clearly indicating that even he felt fear upon hearing the news of the deaths of the king of Jinshi and the young heir apparent of the West Town King's estate. What good is the Golden Tiger Cavalry? Were the Golden Tiger Cavalry accompanying The old king of Jinshi, upon hearing this news, furiously pounded the ground repeatedly with the cane in his hand, while his gaze coldly swept toward the direction of the border. Reporting to the old king, the Prince of Jinbei's estate possesses an extremely powerful and mysterious army. This time, they not only killed the king, but also slaughtered 10,000 Golden Tiger Cavalry of our western border. The soldier below continued speaking after hearing the old Prince Jinbei's words. At the same time, his eyes were filled with horror. Only by truly seeing that battlefield did he know how cruel that great battle was. Even the world's foremost Golden Tiger Cavalry had no power to fight back in this battle. From this, one could imagine just how powerful that army of the Prince of Jinbei's estate truly was. How many troops did the Prince of Jinbei's estate dispatch in total this time? The old king of Jinshi finally recovered from his fury at this moment, then reluctantly closed his eyes and slowly questioned the soldier before him. Chapter 38, The Western Prince's Palace Sends Troops, The Northern Prince's Decision. The old king of Jinshi was very confident in the strength of his Golden Tiger Cavalry, so he now speculated that it must have been a larger army that annihilated the Golden Tiger Cavalry. Reporting to the old prince, the Prince of Jinbei's estate dispatched a total of 3,000 troops this time. They wore white armor and rode white warhorses. They are a silver-armored cavalry unit. The soldier, hearing the old king of Jinshi's words, slowly spoke, and at the same time, there was still shock in his eyes regarding the White Horse volunteers. How was this possible? How could 3,000 cavalry fight against my 10,000 Golden Tiger Cavalry and ultimately achieve victory? The old king of Jinshi was even more incredulous after hearing this news. His slowly closed eyes instantly opened wide, and he looked at the soldier in front of him with an expression of disbelief. The soldier in front of the old king of Jinshi did not reply to the old king of Jinshi's words. Instead, he knelt trembling before him. Who are the key figures in this expedition from the prince of Jinbei's estate? After a long while, the old king of Jinshi finally recovered from his disbelief, then slowly looked at the soldier in front of him and asked. This time, the prince of Jinbei, Chu Tianxiong, and the prince of Jinbei's heir, Chu Fan, are in the western region. Although the soldier did not know the main purpose of his old prince's question, he quickly reported the information he knew. Chu Tianxiong and Chu Fan are both there? In that case, this king will ensure you do not leave the western region. Hearing the information reported by the soldier, the old king of Jinshi's eyes instantly lit up, and his previous anger transformed into a strong, icy chill. Where have they reached now? Then, the old king of Jinshi continued to question the soldier in front of him, and the killing intent in his eyes was unleashed without any concealment, making the surrounding environment seem to drop several degrees. Their travel speed is very slow. They have only just left the Monster Beast mountain range. Your subordinate estimates that it will take them at least 7 or 8 days to reach Kaiyuan City. The soldier, hearing his old prince's question, also quickly reported the information. 7 or 8 days. That's enough. After hearing the soldier's reply, a look of excitement instantly appeared on the old king of Jinshi's face, and then he gazed leisurely in the direction of the northern region. Chulong, oh Chulong, this time this king will make you childless. Subsequently, the old king of Jinshi drove his war chariot directly to the West Town King's estate's main camp. Early the next morning, the old king of Jinshi led a mighty army of 200,000, chasing after Chu Fan and the others. Among them, Lin Xiao, the vanguard of the West Town King's estate, even led 50,000 iron cavalry to intercept Chu Fan and the others' path in advance. This means that this time, the West Town King's estate dispatched a total of 250,000 troops. No one would have thought that the old king of Jinshi would dispatch 250,000 troops to capture Chu Tianxiong and Chu Fan. Just as the old king of Jinshi personally led the army to pursue Chu Fan and Chu Tianxiong. Black and white mysterious sword from the net of Luo also arrived at the prince of Jinbei's estate. Black and white mysterious sword arrived outside the prince of Jinbei's estate, then took out a jade pendant and handed it to the 2 guards of the gate. Give this to the old prince of Jinbei, and tell him that the heir has something important and wishes for your subordinate to see the old prince of Jinbei. The gate guards, looking at the jade pendant that signified the heir's identity in their hands, quickly took it and rushed towards the old prince of Jinbei, Chulong's pavilion. Reporting to your highness, someone is here with the heir's jade pendant, requesting an audience. The soldier who arrived outside the door respectfully spoke directly to Chulong inside. Bring him in. Chulong was a little surprised to hear the soldier's words, so he exchanged a glance with Jia Qiming in front of him and slowly spoke. Then, the soldier quickly went to bring Black and White Mysterious Sword in, and, at the same time, he handed the token Black and White Mysterious Sword gave him to Chulong. Black and White Mysterious Sword greets your highness. This is a letter the heir asked your subordinate to bring to your highness. After Black and White Mysterious Sword entered, he did not explain much. He respectfully handed the letter in his hand to Chulong. Jia Qiming, in front of Chulong, quickly stepped forward to take the letter, then slowly handed it to Chulong. I shall take my leave. Seeing that the letter had reached Chulong's hands, Black and White Mysterious Sword bowed to Chulong, then left the room and instantly disappeared from the prince of Jinbei's estate. Another unfamiliar cultivator of the spirit roaming realm. Little Fan truly brings us many surprises. Chulong looked at the departing Black and White Mysterious Sword, a look of surprise appearing in his eyes. When Black and White Mysterious Sword entered, he had already sensed that Black and White Mysterious Sword's cultivation had reached the spirit roaming realm. Therefore, Chulong was still somewhat surprised by the surprise Chu Fan brought him. Your Highness, please open the letter first to see why Little Fan sent it. Jia Qiming nodded after hearing Chulong's words, then looked at the letter in Chulong's hand with curiosity and spoke. Chulong, hearing Jia Qiming's words, slowly opened the letter. He only read it for a few breaths before he memorized its contents. Then, Chulong looked in the direction of the western region with an incredulous expression. Jia Qiming, seeing Chulong's expression, slowly took the letter from his hand. After reading the letter, his expression was identical to Chulong's. Little Fan and Tianxiong have completely turned the entire western region upside down. After a long while, Jia Qiming finally looked at Chulong with a sigh, the incredulity in his eyes turning into an expression of surprise. Yes, it is. I'm afraid our prince of Jinbei's estate's secret agents will soon send the news. Chu Long had not expected his grandson to cause such a huge stir when he went out, turning the entire western region upside down. At the same time, what he did not expect even more was that his grandson's subordinates actually included 2 cultivators of the Dharma aspect realm. Qiming, do you think Little Fan and Tianxiong's plan can be implemented? Chu Long asked Jia, Qiming in front of him, somewhat moved. Your Highness, what we worried about most before was not having cultivators of the Dharma aspect realm in our hands. Now that Little Fan subordinates have 2 cultivators of the Dharma aspect realm, why should we fear the great Yin imperial family? Jia Qiming's eyes sparkled as he heard Chu Long's words and countered Chu Long's question. Ha ha ha, Qiming understands me best. Order all generals to come to the prince's estate for a meeting. Chu Long burst into laughter after hearing Jia Qiming's words. Then, he folded the letter in his hand and slowly walked out of the room. Jia Qiming also had a look of joy after hearing Chu Long's words. Chapter 39, The Northern Prince's Army Deploys, Feng Rontian's Worries. Subsequently, all the generals of the Prince of Jinbei's estate arrived at the Prince of Jinbei's estate. After an hour of discussion at the Prince of Jinbei's estate, the entire northern region began to mobilize. The next day, Marshal Chu Hang of the Prince of Jinbei's estate led an army of 600,000 to the western region. Marshal Chu Hang joined the Prince of Jinbei's army when Chu Long first established it. After decades of campaigns, he became the Grand Marshal of Jinbei. It could be said that even Chu Tianxiong would respectfully call him Uncle Chu. At the same time, Marshal Chu Hang's realm had reached the spirit roaming realm. This time, he would serve as the primary commander leading the 600,000-strong army to attack the western region. A few days passed quickly. During these days, Chu Fan and the others continuously encountered armies trying to intercept them, but in front of the White Horse volunteers, these armies seemed so insignificant. It could be said that they killed their way through, but to the outside world, their speed was slowed down by these armies. Even after 3 days, Chu Fan and his group had only covered less than half the journey. Based on their current speed, it would take at least 5 or 6 more days to reach Kaiyuan City. And in these 3 days, the news of Chu Fan and Chu Tianxiong leading an army in the western region had spread throughout the world. Although people did not know why Chu Fan and Chu Tianxiong appeared in the western region, the news of Chu Fan and Chu Tianxiong killing the king of Jinshi and the young master of the West Town King's estate also spread. More importantly, the news that old king of Jinshi was leading hundreds of thousands of troops to pursue Chu Fan and Chu Tianxiong also came out. Everyone believed that this time, Chu Fan and Chu Tianxiong would not be able to escape the king of Jinshi's pursuit, as the army led by the father and son only amounted to a few thousand men. In the imperial capital of Great Yin, Murong Li naturally also received this news. His expression changed from anger to happiness, and finally directly to excitement. Prince of Jinbei's estate, of all people you could provoke, you had to provoke my imperial uncle. This time, let's see if your Prince of Jinbei's estate will have any descendants left. Murong Li looked in the direction of the Prince of Jinbei's estate and spoke happily. He did not believe that Chu Fan and Chu Tianxiong could escape under such circumstances. Long San, send out the Golden Guard's experts to help my imperial uncle. This time, I want to keep Chu Fan and Chu Tianxiong in the western region forever. After his outburst of joy, Murong Li also spoke to the shadow beside him. After speaking, Murong Li's eyes gazed distantly towards the western region, and from his distant gaze, one could mostly see joy. The Phoenix family, a top family of the Great Yin Imperial Dynasty, naturally also heard the rumors about the western region. Head of the Feng family, Feng Rantian, looked in the direction of the western region with a pensive expression. He was not just the head of the Feng family. His other identity was Chu Fan's maternal uncle. Father, younger male cousin Chu Fan, and uncle are now trapped in the western region. Is our Phoenix family not going to act? A young girl with a perfect figure and delicate features looked worriedly towards the western region and asked, Our Phoenix family cannot act now. Otherwise, it would be equivalent to declaring war on the entire Great Yin Imperial Dynasty. Feng Rantian sighed silently after hearing the young girl's words. How could he not worry about the safety of Chu Fan and Chu Tianxiong? It was just that if the Phoenix family acted now, it would mean that the Phoenix family would completely declare war on the Great Yin Imperial Dynasty. One must know that their Phoenix family was not like the Prince of Jinbei's estate, far from the center of the Great Yin Imperial Dynasty. The Phoenix family's location was not far from the imperial capital of the Great Yin Imperial Dynasty. As soon as they made any move, the Great Yin Imperial Dynasty would definitely send out powerful experts to annihilate their Phoenix family. Are we just going to stand by and watch? The young girl spoke unwillingly after hearing her father's words. This young girl was Feng Rontian's daughter, and also Chu Fan's older female cousin, Feng Ziki. She had already reached the divine power realm at a young age. It could be said that she was considered a prodigy of the entire eastern region. But she was very fond of Chu Fan, who had followed her since childhood, always calling her older sister. Now, hearing that the brat who had followed her since childhood, calling her older sister, was trapped in the western region, she was naturally very worried. Ziqi, don't worry. Since Chu Tianxiong and that brat Chu Fan dared to appear in the western region, it means they have the confidence to leave the western region. It's just that I didn't expect them to directly kill the king of Jinshi and the young master of the West Town King's estate this time. Doesn't this mean declaring war on the entire Great Yin? At this moment, Feng Rantian was still pondering the true purpose of the Chu family's actions this time. After all, Chu Fan and Chu Tianxiong directly killing the young master of the West Town King's estate and the king of Jinshi was tantamount to declaring war on the entire Great Yin. If it were merely the killing of a young master of the West Town King's estate, then the situation would still be manageable, as deaths are normal in conflicts between peers. But now, even the king of Jinshi had been killed. Such a situation could be said to have completely enraged the Great Yin Imperial Dynasty. Feng Ziqi became even more worried about the safety of Chu Fan and the others after hearing her father's words. At this time, the commotion in the western region had naturally spread throughout the entire Great Yin Imperial Dynasty. Many forces were shocked upon hearing that Chu Fan and Chu Tianxiong were trapped in the western region. If Chu Fan and Chu Tianxiong truly perished in the western region, then the Prince of Jinbei's estate would completely decline, and old Prince of Jinbei, Chu Long, would likely become that dragon on the verge of resurgence. At that time, Chu Long's madness would not be something anyone could stop. However, such a situation was what these forces hoped to see. After all, once Chu Long and the Prince of Jinbei's estate fell, the entire northern region would become a cake for these forces to divide. Just as all the forces of Great Yin were focused on the western region, a troop of tens of thousands of soldiers appeared outside Kaiyuan City. This cavalry force was majestic. Leading them was a man holding a heavenly halberd, like a god of war. Meanwhile, the city lord inside Kaiyuan City had not noticed the situation outside. After all, Kaiyuan City was a dividing line between the northern region and the western region. So who would dare to attack Kaiyuan City? The entire Kaiyuan City presented a scene of peace and harmony, with singing and dancing, completely oblivious to the impending danger. In the alleys of Tianyuan City, several men in black were constantly flashing past. After a while, these men in black successively arrived in a house. Reporting to my lord, the West City Gate has been controlled by the net of Luo. Now we only need to wait for General Lu Bu's army to arrive. One of the men in black reported to the leading man in black, a faint light flashing in his eyes. Our embroidered uniform guard has also taken the South City Gate. We just need to open the gate as soon as the army arrives. A man in a patterned brocade uniform next to the man in black slowly spoke. This person was the leader of the embroidered uniform guard in Kaiyuan City. Chapter 40: The Battle of Kaiyuan City. An overwhelming victory. The strength of the net of Luo and the embroidered uniform guard was still quite considerable. Within just a few days of the decision to attack Kaiyuan City, they managed to capture 2 of Kaiyuan City's gates. It could be said that Lu Bu could now lead his army into Kaiyuan City without any surprises. As for the other 2 city gates, why would the army entering Kaiyuan City need to worry about them? The leader of the net of Luo nodded with satisfaction after hearing the reports from the net of Luo and the embroidered uniform guard, after which both the net of Luo and the embroidered uniform guard withdrew to await the arrival of Lu Bu's army. Night soon fell, and Lu Bu, having received the news, led 10,000 Bingzhou iron cavalry, waiting between the South Gate and the West Gate. These 10,000 Bingzhou iron cavalry, once Kaiyuan City's gates opened, could directly charge into Kaiyuan City. Lu Bu himself looked at Kaiyuan City before him with excitement, as he had not truly fought a major battle since being summoned. Although Lu Bu had acted as the vanguard alone and slain thousands in the preceding days, the current war was what excited him even more. After all, this was the kind of war he loved, where he could lead his army to attack the city before him. As night slowly descended, the environment outside Kaiyuan City gradually merged into the darkness, and the figures of Lu Bu and his army, waiting outside Kaiyuan City, also blended into the pitch-black night sky. At this time, Kaiyuan City was still filled with singing and dancing, completely unaware that a wave of killing intent was approaching them. Lu Bu, seeing that the time was almost right, turned to the spirit roaming realm deputy general beside him and ordered, "Take 5,000 soldiers and break through the West Gate." After speaking, Lu Bu led the remaining 5,000 men directly towards the South Gate, and at Kaiyuan City South Gate, hundreds of figures appeared, and then the gatekeeping soldiers fell one by one. They had no idea that a group of people in the dark night sky was ambushing them. In just a few breaths, all the soldiers at Kaiyuan City South Gate were eliminated, and after dealing with them, these hundreds of men in black directly opened Kaiyuan City South Gate. Then they quietly waited at Kaiyuan City's south gate for Lu Bu's army to arrive. Lu Bu's army moved very quickly. A dark army slowly approached from afar. At the same time, the sound of horse hooves reached the ears of the soldiers on Kaiyuan City's walls. Thus, the soldiers of Kaiyuan City all looked towards the dark night sky. Although they could not see Lu Bu's army at this time, they felt a terrifying gaze from the darkness looking towards them. Before they could react, Lu Bu, leading the Bingzhou Iron Cavalry, had already rushed to within several hundred zhang outside the south gate. Enemy attack. The Kaiyuan City general, seeing this scene, immediately shouted at the soldiers inside the city. The soldiers on Kaiyuan City's walls, upon hearing the general's words, all became alert, staring intently at Lu Bu's army below. However, after seeing that Lu Bu's army numbered only a few thousand, their worry subsided. They did not believe that Lu Bu could break through their city gate with just a few thousand men, but what they did not notice was that Lu Bu did not stop at all when he reached the south gate, but instead led his several thousand-strong force directly into Kaiyuan City's south gate. The general, seeing this scene, instantly froze. This sight was beyond his expectation, and by the time he reacted, Lu Bu's army had already entered the city. What is going on? How did this army enter the city so quickly? Kaiyuan City's general still looked helplessly at the city gate below, only to suddenly notice that Kaiyuan City's south gate was open. Everyone, follow me and intercept this army. The general, having recovered, showed a hint of anger in his eyes, shouting at the soldiers around him, and at the same time, he took his long spear and charged down the city wall. At this moment, he intended to use his own strength to eliminate Lu Bu's army here. Otherwise, if he disturbed his city lord, he believed he would definitely be punished. The other soldiers, upon hearing the general's words, also reacted and rushed down after their general. Meanwhile, Lu Bu, who had entered the city, led the Bingzhou Iron Cavalry behind him in a massacre against the resisting forces within the city. Although the Bingzhou Iron Cavalry's strength was not comparable to the White Horse Volunteers, they still achieved an overwhelming victory when facing these ordinary armies. Moreover, the soldiers inside Kaiyuan City had not yet reacted, so naturally, only slaughter awaited them. By the time Kaiyuan City's general led the soldiers from the city wall down to stop Lu Bu, Kaiyuan City had already been largely massacred by Lu Bu's army. Subsequently, Lu Bu directly led his forces to slaughter the general and the soldiers who had come down from the city wall. Surrender and live. Seeing that the tens of thousands of soldiers ahead were beginning to panic, Lu Bu directly unleashed the chi belonging to his Dharma aspect realm, then shouted at the tens of thousands of soldiers in front of him. Those soldiers, who were already in a panic and planning to escape, felt this powerful chi and hastily threw down their weapons. Then they looked uneasily in Lu Bu's direction. They had just seen Lu Bu's demon godlike figure, and now they naturally dared not offer much resistance. Seeing the numerous soldiers who dared not resist, Lu Bu directly left half of his Bingzhou Iron Cavalry behind to suppress them, and then continued to lead the other half of the Bingzhou Iron Cavalry towards Kaiyuan City's city lord's mansion. Wherever he passed, there were mountains of corpses and seas of blood. Kaiyuan City's army was simply unable to stop Lu Bu's advance. Each swing of his heavenly halberd resulted in at least dozens, if not hundreds, of deaths. In less than an hour of marching, the number of soldiers who had fallen to Lu Bu's hand already reached tens of thousands. Not to mention the soldiers who fell to the Bingzhou Iron Cavalry behind him. At this time, Lu Bu did not stop, but continued to charge towards the city lord mansion. He wanted to prove to his young master that his Bingzhou Iron Cavalry was invincible, and at the same time, Lu Bu hoped that by the time his young master arrived, he would have completely dealt with the unsettling factors within Kaiyuan City. Chapter 41. Taking Kaiyuan City, Lu Bu collects captured soldiers. At the same time, the deputy general of the Bingzhou Iron Cavalry, who was in the spirit roaming realm, also led the Bingzhou Iron Cavalry behind him and charged into the west gate. Although his methods were not as formidable as Lu Bu's. However, leading the Bingzhou Iron Cavalry behind him, he still quickly captured the west gate of Kaiyuan City. After accomplishing this, he did not choose to head to the city lord's manor. Instead, he chose to continue leading the Bingzhou Iron Cavalry behind him to occupy the other two major city gates. He believed that his general had already headed to the city lord's manor in Kaiyuan City, and his presence there would not make much difference. Therefore, with the help of the net of Luo and the embroidered uniform guard, this deputy general of the Bingzhou Iron Cavalry only took a few hours to capture the other two major city gates of Kaiyuan City. Only after completing all this did he take the few hundred soldiers around him and head in the direction of the city lord's manor. As for the rest of the soldiers, they were all dispatched by him to suppress the surrendered troops. Meanwhile, Lu Bu was sitting in the city lord's seat within the city lord's manor, and kneeling before him was a middle-aged man. If the soldiers of Kaiyuan City were present, they might recognize that this kneeling middle-aged man was none other than the city lord of Kaiyuan City. It turned out that when Lu Bu had just broken into the city lord's manor of Kaiyuan City, he found this man frolicking with his beautiful wife. Thus, Lu Bu immediately captured him alive without a word. Lu Bu did not kill him. Instead, he planned to keep him alive for his young master to deal with. However, the city lord of Kaiyuan City was a very cowardly individual. Seeing Lu Bu unleash his divine might and wipe out all the soldiers in the city lord's manor, he weakly knelt down right there. At the same time, he knew in his heart that Kaiyuan City had probably already fallen into the hands of the man before him. "Sir, I see you're heroic and divine might. You must be lacking a subordinate, right? Could you perhaps take me in?" The city lord of Kaiyuan City looked at Lu Bu, who was sitting in the city lord's seat, and spoke flatteringly, his eyes showing no trace of the arrogance of a city lord, but rather the demeanor of a rogue. When Lu Bu heard the words of the city lord of Kaiyuan City, he frowned. At that moment, he suddenly wanted to execute the fellow before him. The city lord of Kaiyuan City naturally noticed Lu Bu frowning, so he instantly lowered his head, as if Lu Bu wouldn't see him if he did so. "Take him away and guard him well. Wait for the young master to deal with him." Lu Bu glanced at the fellow kneeling before him and instructed the two Bingzhou iron cavalry soldiers beside him. Immediately afterward, the two Bingzhou iron cavalry soldiers stepped forward and escorted the city lord of Kaiyuan City away. As the city lord of Kaiyuan City was being led away, he wanted to speak to Lu Bu, but when he saw the coldness in Lu Bu's eyes, he wisely shut his mouth. However, at this moment, the city lord of Kaiyuan City also gleaned an important piece of information from Lu Bu's words. This general, who looked like a devil god, still had a young master above him. This meant that when he met the young master, he might still have a chance to live. Thinking of this, the city lord of Kaiyuan City suddenly came up with many ideas. Of course, Lu Bu was unaware of all this. His main objective right now was to turn Kaiyuan City into his own territory. Time quickly moved to the next day. Although the people of Kaiyuan City heard the sounds of killing and shouting last night, they did not know that Kaiyuan City had already changed hands. At this moment, Lu Bu was leading his army, continuously sweeping away the remaining resisting forces within Kaiyuan City. Finally, after half a day, Lu Bu managed to gather all the armies of Kaiyuan City together. All these troops had surrendered to Lu Bu. Their number astonishingly reached 40,000. The total number of soldiers in Kaiyuan City originally amounted to 100,000. After the massacre last night, the current military strength of Kaiyuan City was only 40,000. The reason the total number of soldiers in Kaiyuan City was so high was that this place was the junction between the northern and western borders. Therefore, the populace here was fierce, and the number of soldiers naturally tended to be higher. However, due to the long period without combat, their fighting capability was exceptionally weak. Of course, compared to ordinary armies, their combat effectiveness was not too weak, but when truly compared to those well-known armies, their fighting capacity was still somewhat lacking. This general knows you're all wondering who this general is. Today, this general will tell you here. This general is named Lu Bu, one of the great generals under the Prince of Jinbei's heir. This time, you must either sincerely pledge allegiance to our army, or be completely annihilated by this general. Lu Bu arrived at the military camp and looked at the soldiers whose eyes were filled with dejection. He couldn't help but feel a little disdain. He hadn't expected the soldiers of Kaiyuan City to be so weak and incompetent. Although these soldiers were physically stronger than many others, Lu Bu could clearly see that they hadn't trained for a long time. Thus, they only possessed brute strength. However, Lu Bu had taken a liking to them now, as troops like these, given half a year training by him, would at least qualify as an elite unit. The 40,000 soldiers of Kaiyuan City below were instantly stunned after hearing Lu Bu's words. As for the Prince of Jinbei's heir, they had naturally heard of him. They hadn't expected this general on the platform, who resembled a devil god, to actually be a subordinate of the Prince of Jinbei's heir. At the same time, a strange look appeared in their eyes. Every soldier naturally wanted to become a general. Although they had been living stable lives for years, seeing the dazzling figures of the Bingzhou Iron Cavalry under Lu Bu last night made them want to become one of them too. "I sincerely surrender to the general. I wonder if I can become someone like them." At this moment, a burly soldier slowly stepped out, looking cautiously at the Bingzhou Iron Cavalry beside Lu Bu, his eyes filled with longing, and asked. After hearing the soldier's words, the other soldiers also secretly looked toward Lu Bu, their eyes filled with anticipation. "As long as you surrender to this general will absolutely ensure that you become a famous army of great yin in the future." Hearing the words of the stout soldier, Lu Bu slowly stepped forward and guaranteed, his voice spreading throughout the entire formation. The army, which had originally been tinged with despair, instantly reacted upon hearing Lu Bu's voice. The 40,000 soldiers looked toward Lu Bu, their faces showing eagerness. Chapter 42 Chu Fan encounters an interception, Lin Xiao and Chu Tianxiong's feud. The 40,000 captive soldiers below stirred restlessly after hearing Lu Bu's words. Your subordinate, General Chun Zi, greets the general. Just as the various armies were still stirring, the soldier who had just spoken out to inquire also directly stepped forward and knelt before Lu Bu. His eyes were filled with longing and excitement, clearly intending to pledge allegiance to Lu Bu. Li Ergu greets the general. Huang Shan greets the general. Wu Tianqi greets the general. Wang Er greets the general. With this person leading the way, the other Kaiyuan city soldiers also knelt before Lu Bu, their wavering hearts now completely decided. Lu Bu looked at the 40,000 captive generals who had already pledged allegiance to him, a smile appearing in his eyes, and then he handed over all the armies below to his deputy generals. He did not have that much time to train this army. What Lu Bu needed to do now was to completely eliminate any unsettling situations within Kaiyuan City. He did not wish for there to still be danger in Kaiyuan City when his young master arrived, as this was Lu Bu's first time conquering a city for his young master. He wanted to make this great battle perfect. Meanwhile, on the other side, Chu Fan and the others had, after several days of travel, arrived outside Liaoxi City in the Western Territory. Liaoxi City was not far from Kaiyuan City. If they traveled at full speed, Chu Fan and the others could reach Kaiyuan City in at most 2 days. However, Chu Fan and the others could not travel at full speed now, because an army was blocking their path forward. It seems trouble has arrived. I didn't expect that old fellow to even send out Lin Xiao. Chu Tianxiong slowly spoke as he looked at the leader of the army before him, a hint of worry also appearing in his eyes. Although they had encountered armies trying to intercept them these past few days, those armies were not strong and were easily defeated by the White Horse Volunteers. However, this army and its leader before them were not simple figures. Father, is Lin Xiao very strong? Chu Fan, after hearing Chu Tianxiong's words, also looked at the leader of this army with some confusion, and then slowly asked Chu Tianxiong. Lin Xiao, one of the 4 great generals of the Western Territory, known as the person most likely to become the Grand Marshal of the Western Territory. He once led 30,000 men to defeat 100,000 of the Tianxin dynasty, and later even directly led 10,000 cavalry to rescue Murong-Ci from among 100,000 men. Of course, he became legendary with this battle, earning the title Wolf King of the Western Territory, and the 50,000 troops behind him are his Western Wolf Army. Chu Tianxiong slowly spoke as he looked in Lin Xiao's direction. Chu Tianxiong was very familiar with the person before him. After all, this person was known as the Wolf King of the Western Territory, so how could he not have heard his name? Wolf King of the Western Territory, huh? Zilong, what do you think of this army? Chu Fan had not expected the person who appeared this time to be the long-renowned Wolf King of the Western Territory, so he slowly looked at Zhao Zilong beside him and spoke. Of course, Chu Fan was not worried at this moment. After all, he had so many strong individuals by his side. Even without an army, it would be easy for him to escape the encirclement of these 50,000 troops. Although this army has some strength, it won't cause much of a stir in front of your subordinate generals, White Horse Volunteers. Zhao Zilong looked at the 50,000 Western Wolf Army in front and confidently spoke to Chu Fan. Just as Zhao Zilong's words fell, Lin Xiao slowly walked out from his Western Wolf Army, looking at Chu Tianxiong with a mocking gaze. Chu Tianxiong, after so many years, did you ever think there would be a day like this? Lin Xiao, having arrived at the front of the army, slowly looked at Chu Tianxiong and spoke, his tone filled with hatred. Lin Xiao, I also didn't expect a bastard like you to appear here. But can these so-called Western Dog Army behind you stop this prince? Although Chu Tianxiong was wary of Lin Xiao and the army behind him, he still smiled disdainfully at Lin Xiao and said, Chu Tianxiong, this time you are doomed. Even if the prince of Jinbei's estate's army comes, they won't be able to save you. After Lin Xiao heard Chu Tianxiong's words, a chill instantly appeared in his eyes, and then his voice echoed throughout the entire army. Father has a grudge with Lin Xiao. Chu Fan, who was watching Chu Tianxiong and Lin Xiao's current state from behind, also spoke with some bewilderment. He had originally thought this great battle would begin soon, but he didn't expect it to turn into a mutual scolding between his own father and Lin Xiao. The Prince of Jinbei and Lin Xiao, the Wolf King of the Western Territory, have had more than one major battle in the past, and almost every time it ended in a draw, so neither of them thinks highly of the other. Luo Tianyi slowly stepped forward and chuckled after hearing Chu Fan's words. At this moment, she was not worried at all about being surrounded by 50,000 troops. Instead, her gaze was entirely focused on Chu Fan. Over these past few days, Chu Fan had also wanted Luo Tianyi and Shangwan Qingcheng to leave, but Luo Tianyi and Shangwan Qingcheng chose not to leave Chu Fan. Instead, they had been following his group. The two of them seemed to have latched onto Chu Fan. Chu Fan, after hearing Luo Tiany's words, also looked at his father with some amusement. He hadn't expected his father to have a grudge with this person. Of course, none of that is the most important thing. The most important thing is that this Wolf King of the Western Territory is related to the Prince of Jinbei's consort, which is why the Prince of Jinbei would mock this Wolf King of the Western Territory so much. Chu Fan had not yet spoken when Shangguan Qingcheng, who was beside him, slowly stepped forward and said, a captivating smile appearing in her eyes. How did it get dragged to my mother? Chu Fan became even more confused after hearing Shangguan Qingcheng's words, so he spoke with some curiosity. Of course, at this moment, he also secretly made a mental note of Lin Xiao. Keeping this guy in his little notebook was one of Chu Fan's quirks. Most people he noted down rarely had a chance to live. Even Luo Tiany, after hearing Shangguan Qingcheng's words, looked at Shangguan Qingcheng with a curious expression. After all, she had never heard about the Prince of Jinbei's consort either. Lin Xiao once met the Prince of Jinbei's consort when he was young. At that time, he was captivated by the Prince of Jinbei's consort's beauty, but the Prince of Jinbei's consort did not like him, even detested him greatly. Ultimately, the Prince of Jinbei's consort married the Prince of Jinbei, and it was from then on that Lin Xiao began to resent the Prince of Jinbei and the Prince of Jinbei's estate. Shangguan Qingcheng also slowly revealed what she knew at this moment, her captivating eyes still fixed on Chu Fan. Chapter 43, The Great Battle Begins, Lin Xiao's Plans. Chu Fan had not expected that Lin Xiao, standing before him, had such a deep grudge with their Prince of Jinbei's estate. However, now that he knew, he had no intention of letting Lin Xiao continue to live. Chu Fan didn't care if he was the Wolf King of the Western Territory at this moment. Just as Chu Fan made up his mind, the argument between Chu Tianxiong and Lin Xiao ended. Lin Xiao rode his warhorse back to his wolf cavalry. Chu Tianxiong, with a solemn expression, slowly returned to his son's side. This is likely to be a brutal battle, brat. You need to be careful yourself. After Chu Tianxiong returned, he spoke slowly to Chu Fan. At the same time, he took out a great saber, clearly intending to participate in this grand battle as well. On the other side, Lin Xiao evidently intended to launch an attack. He led 50,000 wolf cavalry directly towards Chu Fan and the others, charging to kill. Instantly, dust rose everywhere, as if an earth-shattering battle was about to begin. White Horse volunteers, kill for this general. Seeing this scene, Zhao Zilong showed no fear. He single-handedly led the White Horse volunteers to charge towards the 50,000 wolf cavalry. Where righteousness leads, life and death follow. Heaven is my witness, the White Horse my proof. Where righteousness leads, life and death follow. Heaven is my witness, the White Horse my proof. The White Horse volunteers following behind Zhao Zilong also shouted their slogan. Their voices echoed across the entire wilderness as if piercing through the earth. As for Jianwei and Su Chu, they could no longer hold back. At this moment, the two of them were like two killing machines, constantly charging and slaughtering at the front of the White Horse volunteers. Indeed, they are an undefeated army. Even their slogan makes one's blood boil. Brat, I'm going to the battlefield. After hearing the slogan of the White Horse volunteers, the Prince of Jinbei's face showed excitement and battle intent. Then, he held his great saber and charged towards the battlefield. Clearly, having been in the Meteor Dragon Mountain range all these days, he hadn't fought, which made him feel a bit uncomfortable. Now that war was upon them, he naturally hoped that he, the commander, would charge into battle. Old Huang, keep an eye on my father for me. Don't let him get hurt in this great battle. Chu Fan looked at Chu Tianxiong, who had already charged into the battlefield with his great saber, and spoke helplessly to Old Huang. Young master, rest assured, with Old Huang here, the prince will not be in danger. After hearing Chu Fan's words, Old Huang slowly nodded. At the same time, a silly smile appeared on his face, making him look like a truly ordinary old man. Shangguan Qingcheng and Luo Tiany, upon hearing Chu Fan's words, also turned their gazes towards Old Huang in front of them. They had initially thought Old Huang was just an ordinary person. However, from the current conversation between Chu Fan and Old Huang, they realized that Old Huang was not as simple as they had imagined. At the same time, they finally understood why Chu Fan would keep such an ordinary-looking person by his side. After all, as the Prince of Jinbei's heir, it was impossible for him to keep truly ordinary people by his side. Meanwhile, the White Horse volunteers and Lin Xiao's wolf cavalry collided. Instantly, hundreds of bodies appeared at the point of contact between the two armies. Dianwei and Su Chu were even more like meat grinders, constantly slaughtering the wolf cavalry in front of them. In front of these two cultivators at the Xinyu Perfect Realm, These wolf cavalry were truly terrifyingly weak. They were directly cut down by the two, without even a chance to resist. As for Zhao Zilong on the other side, he also directly unleashed his cultivation at the Dharma aspect realm, with a silver dragon Dharma aspect appearing behind him. Every spear thrust he made brought down at least hundreds of wolf cavalry. At this moment, Zhao Zilong truly displayed his full strength. Previously, he had always commanded the army to attack, but now that he had joined the battlefield, his strength was even more terrifying. These ordinary soldiers simply could not stop him. This is a Dharma aspect. The Prince of Jinbei's estate has a Dharma aspect realm existence. Lin Xiao, who was leading the wolf cavalry in a charge, naturally saw this scene. An expression of disbelief appeared on his face. After all, a Dharma aspect realm existence was a top-tier figure in any dynasty, and often a reclusive one. Now, the Prince of Jinbei's estate had actually deployed a Dharma aspect realm individual. This meant that if this Dharma aspect realm expert wanted to escape, his 50,000 wolf cavalry might not even be able to stop him. The Prince of Jinbei's estate hides itself very deeply. However, if you send out a Dharma aspect realm cultivator, then wouldn't his side be less safe? Lin Xiao took a deep breath, then slowly turned his gaze towards Chu Fan's direction. At this moment, only a few women and an ordinary old man were by Chu Fan's side. Lin Xiao didn't believe that these women and this old man were peerless experts. You all come with me to capture Chu Fan alive. I don't believe they can just ignore Chu Fan. If they really don't care about Chu Fan, then we will capture him. Lin Xiao looked at Chu Fan's direction with burning eyes, then led a team of elite wolf cavalry towards Chu Fan. At the same time, when they encountered the White Horse volunteers, they bypassed them directly to avoid wasting time. The White Horse volunteers, currently engaged in a fierce battle, naturally did not notice Lin Xiao and his group. After all, they were facing 50,000 wolf cavalry, a number more than 10 times greater than their own. Lin Xiao and his group of several thousand elite wolf cavalry naturally did not attract their attention. At this moment, even the Prince of Jinbei, Chu Tianxiong, had not noticed the disappearing Lin Xiao. Instead, he was continuously slaughtering in the army, with bursts of laughter occasionally echoing. Perhaps the only one on the battlefield who noticed Lin Xiao and his group were gone was Zhao Zilong. However, Zhao Zilong did not choose to act, as his grandson had old Huang, an expert even he could not defeat, by his side. Young master, Lin Xiao is leading a detachment towards us. Chu Fan's side naturally saw the situation with Lin Xiao. Guojia chuckled and spoke, but clearly, he didn't take the matter before him seriously. Yes, indeed, he lives up to his reputation as the legendary Wolf King of the Western Territory. He probably saw the strength of Zhao Zilong and Dian Wei and the others, which is why he plans to capture me first, and then use that to threaten Zhao Zilong and the others, right? Chu Fan showed no surprise after hearing Guojia's words. Instead, he calmly looked at the battlefield below. He seemed to pay no attention to Lin Xiao, who was coming towards him. Having such a thought indeed makes him a good commander. However, he underestimated a Dharma aspect realm expert. Even if we have no one else protecting us, Zilong only needs an instant to arrive. Guojia nodded in agreement after hearing Chu Fan's words, then looked towards Lin Xiao's direction with a hint of disdain in his eyes. Chapter 44 The Bluebird Strikes Again, The Sorcerer Guojia. Shangguan Qingsheng and Luo Tianyi were initially a bit worried when they saw Lin Xiao leading an elite force to attack them. However, after hearing the conversation between Chu Fan and Guojia, their worries completely vanished. After all, if Chu Fan and Guojia were so confident, then what did this army in front of them amount to? Soon, the army of over 1,000 led by Lin Xiao appeared not far in front of Chu Fan, and he looked at Chu Fan with a sinister gaze. You must be that legendary prince of Jinbei's heir apparent. I didn't expect you to remain so calm in such circumstances. It seems you truly live up to your reputation as a martial arts fanatic. Lin Xiao slowly spoke as he looked at Chu Fan in front of him, and a hint of disdain appeared in his eyes. Clearly, at this moment, he also believed Chu Fan was the legendary martial arts fanatic. Chu Fan shook his head after hearing Lin Xiao's words, then looked at Lin Xiao in front of him as if he were an idiot. You're facing death and still unrepentant. Lin Xiao's anger flared instantly when he saw Chu Fan's gaze, and he roared at Chu Fan. Do you know what you look like in front of me? It was only after hearing his words that Chu Fan finally spoke. Lin Xiao was stunned after hearing Chu Fan's words, then looked at Chu Fan with a hint of curiosity in his eyes. At this moment, not only Lin Xiao, but also Shangguan Qingsheng and Luo Tianyi behind Chu Fan became curious. They wondered how Chu Fan would evaluate the Wolf King of the Western Territory in front of them. In front of this heir apparent, you look like an idiot. You probably don't know the true strength of the Dharma aspect realm, but with your Grotto Heaven realm cultivation, how could you possibly know the true strength of the Dharma aspect realm? Let me put it this way for an idiot like you. If a cultivator of the Dharma aspect realm wanted to stop you, he would only need an instant to appear before this heir apparent. But he's not appearing before me now. Why do you think that is? Chu Fan slowly spoke as he looked at Lin Xiao in front of him, a hint of disdain in his eyes. Naturally, Chu Fan's words completely enraged Lin Xiao. He hadn't expected Chu Fan to look down on him so much. A look of astonishment also appeared on the faces of Shangguan Qingsheng and Luo Tianyi behind Chu Fan. They hadn't expected Chu Fan to have such a side to him. Chu Fan did not make any significant moves as he looked at the enraged Lin Xiao. He gently stroked Luo Qingyun's small head in his arms, then slowly spoke to Qingyao beside him. Kill him. Qingyao, hearing Chu Fan's command, also held her instantaneous spear with battle intent and walked directly towards Lin Xiao. Luo Tianyi only reacted after seeing Qingyao walk out with the instantaneous spear. The first time she met Chu Fan, it was this woman who, wielding her long spear, had slain hundreds of people. In that time, this woman had slain the Golden Tiger Cavalry, so now, facing over 1,000 elites among the Wolf Cavalry, this woman should not be afraid. On the other side, Lin Xiao was somewhat stunned as he watched Qingyao slowly walk towards him. He hadn't expected Chu Fan's trump card to be such a young woman. So, he held his long spear and led over 1,000 elites directly towards Chu Fan. The next second, the 1,000 elites led by Lin Xiao clashed with Qingyao. Qingyao, holding her instantaneous spear, constantly moved through the army. Each swing of the instantaneous spear in Qingyao's hand brought down several wolf cavalry elites. She was like a devil from hell, continuously harvesting the wolf cavalry elites in front of her. In just a moment, Qingyao had slain hundreds of wolf cavalry elites, and at this point, Qingyao became more courageous with each kill. The wolf cavalry elites in front of her simply could not withstand her path of slaughter. Are all of Chu Fan's companions such powerhouses? It seems the world has underestimated the prince of Jinbei's estate. Shangguan Qingsheng, beside Chu Fan, watched Qingyao, who was like a demon god, continuously slaughtering on the battlefield, her eyes flickering. At this moment, Shangguan Qingsheng felt a mysterious power on Chu Fan's body that was resisting her probing. At the same time, she also realized that the prince of Jinbei's estate was probably not as simple as the world imagined. After all, the spirit roaming realm experts dispatched this time alone were no less than 4 or 5, not to mention the 2 Dharma aspect realm existences. Such strength would require even the Tianqin dynasty's imperial family to handle with caution. Chu Fan naturally didn't know what Shangguan Qingsheng beside him was thinking, and even if he did, he wouldn't say anything. After all, his strength was growing stronger every moment, and as long as he was given more time, he could summon more powerhouses. At that time, what other forces would he fear? On the other side, Lin Xiao finally realized that something was wrong. He only reacted when he saw Qingyao, who had slain hundreds of wolf cavalry elites in just a short time. Archers prepared to shoot Chu Fan. Lin Xiao looked at Qingyao, who was slaughtering the wolf cavalry elites in the center of the battlefield, a ruthless expression in his eyes. Then, he gave an order to the wolf cavalry elites beside him. At this moment, he naturally knew that if they continued to charge like this, their wolf cavalry elites would suffer huge losses, so he directly chose to use archers to shoot Chu Fan. As Lin Xiao gave the order, hundreds of archers emerged from behind him and drew their bows towards Chu Fan's direction. Then, a sky full of arrows rained down towards Chu Fan's carriage. I didn't expect Lin Xiao to pull such a trick. Chu Fan looked at the sky full of arrows without worry, but rather with a bit of amusement. Dust rise. Guo Jia smiled after hearing his young master's words, then slowly chanted. The next moment, the dust in front of Chu Fan and the other's carriage continuously gathered, forming a wall of sand in front of them. All the incoming arrows embedded themselves in the sand wall, not penetrating it at all, but rather being blocked by these sand walls. Guo Jia was not just a cultivator of the spirit roaming realm. He was also a warlock. Warlocks can use all things in heaven and earth. The dust in front of them was merely a plaything in the hands of warlocks. Although Guo Jia's cultivation was only at the early stage of the spirit roaming realm, he could even fight a cultivator of the Shinyu perfect realm, and even use warlock techniques to trap a cultivator of the Shinyu perfect realm. Dust condense. Seeing the arrows blocked, Guo Jia spoke again. Then, this sand wall instantly transformed into countless arrows, which, following Guo Jia's command, flew directly towards the wolf cavalry elites. Chapter 45: The Warlock's Power, an Unexpected Gain. The power of these arrows was in no way inferior to the arrows shot by the elite wolf cavalry just moments ago. Lin Zhao's pupils widened in shock upon seeing this scene. He quickly dodged and evaded the arrows formed from sand particles. However, The elite wolf cavalry beside him were not so lucky. The arrows, composed of sand particles, directly pierced through their bodies. They fell helplessly without even having a chance to react. Having finished all of that, Guojia continued discussing the original topic with Chu Fan as if nothing had happened. Lin Xiao is indeed a talent, but he chose the wrong target. However, choosing the young master as his opponent is the most boast-worthy thing in his life, as not everyone is qualified to be the young master's opponent. Guojia spoke to Chu Fan, his eyes completely calm. Ha ha ha, Guojia is right. It is indeed his fortune to be able to stand against me right before his death. Chu Fan burst into laughter after hearing Guojia's words. Then he continued, sitting inside the carriage without moving his gaze. At this moment, they did not notice the stunned Shangwan Qingsheng beside them. Shangwan Qingsheng had not expected that this drunkard beside her was actually a cultivator of the Xinyu realm. Of course, cultivator of the Xinyu realm was no longer the important part. What made her most unbelievable was that Guojia was actually a sorcerer. One must know that sorcerers were legendary figures. Not even the Tianxin dynasty could find a sorcerer. It could be said that besides the strongest imperial dynasty in the eastern region, no other imperial dynasty had the existence of a sorcerer. This was what shocked her the most, as a sorcerer could truly change many things. For example, the sand gathering technique that Guojia had just used, although it was merely a small spell among sorcerers, its power was in no way inferior to the attacks of other spirit roaming realm cultivators. Guojia's casual strike just now eliminated hundreds of elite wolf cavalry. Based on this alone, one could see how powerful a sorcerer truly was. If Guojia were to use his full power, the thousands of wolf cavalry in front of them would be completely unable to resist. A sorcerer? How could the Prince of Junbei's estate possibly have a sorcerer? On the other side, Lin Xiao also looked towards Chu Fan's direction with a face full of shock and dread. He had not expected that Chu Fan had a sorcerer by his side. Furthermore, this sorcerer's cultivation seemed to be in no way inferior to a cultivator of the Xinyu realm. Just based on the sorcerer alone, he knew that he would be unable to get close to Chu Fan this time. But what made him even more desperate was that Qingyao was already about to reach him. The thousands of elite wolf cavalry he had brought were almost completely wiped out, leaving only a few hundred elites desperately resisting Qingyao in front of him. But how could these few hundred men possibly withstand Qingyao's advance? The instantaneous spear in Qingyao's hand continuously flashed with streaks of light. These elite wolf cavalry continued to fall, and in the instant Lin Xiao was distracted, Qingyao had already reached him. Seeing this, Lin Xiao hurriedly picked up the long spear in his hand to block Qingyao's attack. But how could he, who was only in the Grotto Heaven realm, possibly withstand the attack of Qingyao, who was in the late Xinyu realm? The moment their long spears collided, a terrifying force directly sent Lin Xiao flying. He flew hundreds of meters away like a kite with a broken string before slowly coming to a stop in the mud and sand. At this moment, Lin Xiao's hand, gripping the long spear, was still trembling, and a trickle of blood flowed uncontrollably from the corner of his mouth. Qingyao, on the other side, did not give him a chance to catch his breath. Holding the instantaneous spear, Qingyao seemed to transform into a streak of light, appearing before Lin Xiao. The instantaneous spear in her hand shot out directly from Qingyao's grip. The next second, the instantaneous spear, carrying monstrous force, slowly descended from the sky. Lin Xiao dared not use the long spear in his hand to block this strike again. He quickly and miserably dodged the attack. Although Lin Xiao evaded the main force of the strike, Qingyao's spear wind still sent him flying backward again. The long spear in his hand fell out as a result, smashing miserably into the ground and instantly creating a deep crater. At this moment, Lin Xiao truly realized the gap between himself and Qingyao, but now he couldn't even manage to escape. After all, Qingyao, who had just retrieved her long spear, launched another attack against him. The instantaneous spear in Qingyao's hand continuously danced, and streak after streak of spear shadows appeared at the tip. It was as if hundreds of spear lights were heading straight for Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao, who had just crawled out of the deep pit, hurriedly circulated the power of his grotto heaven upon seeing this scene, and a Kylan phantom appeared before him. This Qilin roared in front of Lin Xiao, attempting to use this to block Qingyao's attack. And the fact was exactly as he had thought. The Kylan phantom blocked Qingyao's attack the moment it collided with a long spear in Qingyao's hand. However, because of Qingyao's strike, the Kylan phantom vanished between heaven and earth. Isn't the young master's grotto heaven still missing a few things? Now, a ready-made one has been delivered to our doorstep. Guojia, inside the carriage, instantly brightened upon seeing this scene, and then slowly spoke to Chu Fan. I didn't expect such a harvest on this trip. Guojia, bring him over. I have the ingredient for my first grotto heaven. Chu Fan had also not expected such a gain this time, so he slowly spoke to Guojia. Guojia lightly smiled after hearing Chu Fan's words. Then he gently moved his finger and whispered, "Gather the sand, rise." As Guojia's voice fell, the sand around Lin Xiao suddenly began to slowly gather, forming a giant several dozen meters tall. This giant instantly grabbed Lin Xiao in its hand. Qing Yao, who was originally planning to kill Lin Xiao, naturally saw this scene. Seeing this, she understood that her young master must have a use for this person. Qing Yao leaped up and arrived next to the giant's palm, piercing Lin Xiao's Achilles tendon with one spear thrust, and then taking Lin Xiao from the giant's hand with one arm. Having finished all this, Qing Yao then carried Lin Xiao and walked toward the carriage where Chu Fan was. Meanwhile, Lin Xiao looked at Qing Yao with a face full of pain. "Young master, Qing Yao has brought him." Qing Yao arrived in front of the carriage and respectfully spoke to the inside. Upon hearing Qing Yao's words, Chu Fan slowly walked out of the carriage while holding Luo Qingyan. Looking at the miserable Lin Xiao in front of him, a playful smile appeared on Chu Fan's face. Chapter 46. Obtaining the Qilin's secret technique. The army of the Prince of Zhenbei arrives outside Jinshi Pass. As for Lin Xiao, who was in front of Chu Fan, he looked at Chu Fan with a furious expression, wishing he could tear him apart. "Guojia, it's your turn." Chu Fan merely glanced at Lin Xiao before speaking to Guojia beside him. Then he ignored the person in front of him. Afterward, Chu Fan turned his gaze to the battlefield, where the fierce fighting continued. However, the situation on the battlefield was already clear. Zhao Zilong, leading the White Horse Volunteers, had begun to slaughter the Western Wolf Cavalry. Without a commander, the Western Wolf Cavalry appeared incredibly weak and vulnerable before the White Horse Volunteers, like lambs awaiting slaughter. Moreover, Dian Wei and Su Chu, two powerhouses in the Xinyu Perfect Realm, were constantly cutting through them. Perhaps because Prince of Zhenbei, Chu Tianxiong hadn't fought in a long time, his great saber never stopped moving. And as the Western Wolf Cavalry fell before him, a look of excitement appeared on Chu Tianxiong's face. An hour passed quickly, and within that hour, the White Horse Volunteers completely annihilated the Western Wolf Cavalry. Chu Fan also obtained Lin Xiao's Qilin secret art. As for Lin Xiao, he was tortured to death by Guojia. Indeed, a warlock is an unreasonable existence. Lin Xiao never imagined, even in death, that his Qilin secret art had been acquired by someone else. Having obtained the Qilin secret art, Chu Fan immediately began to cultivate it. With his innate Dao Body, he cultivated the Qilin secret art very quickly, mastering it in less than half an hour. At the same time, one of his grotto heavens also nurtured the Qilin secret art. Just as Chu Fan was about to enter his carriage, a man in black appeared before him, a member of the Net of Luo. "Has the Net of Luo brought any news?" Chu Fan stopped and asked the man in black from the Net of Luo in front of him. His eyes were also filled with curiosity. The appearance of the Net of Luo meant that something good was happening on his side. Even if it wasn't good news, it must be something important that required his decision. Reporting, young master, Kaiyuan City has been successfully captured by General Lu Bu, and it now belongs to you. The man in black from the Net of Luo quickly conveyed the message he was sent to deliver to Chu Fan. It seems Lu Bu's speed isn't slow either. Upon hearing the Net of Luo's words, Chu Fan understood the reason for their visit. He gazed distantly in the direction of Kaiyuan City. At this moment, Chu Fan finally felt relieved, although he had always believed that Lu Bu could successfully capture Kaiyuan City. However, for the past few days, he had been deliberately slowing down his march to attract the attention of the old king of Jinshi. Now, the news from the Net of Luo meant he could fully hasten his journey towards Kaiyuan City. After all, the army he currently led consisted of only 3,000 White Horse Volunteers, and every extra day spent in the western region increased his danger. After receiving the news, Chu Fan waved his hand, dismissing the Net of Luo's scout. Subsequently, Zhao Zilong slowly rode from the army towards Chu Fan. Reporting, young master, this battle annihilated the enemy army. Zhao Zilong dismounted before Chu Fan and slowly addressed him, his face devoid of any expression, as if annihilating the enemy was perfectly normal for him. "Well done. Now we can march at full speed. Lu Bu has already captured Kaiyuan City," Chu Fan said slowly, looking at the majestic Zhao Zilong before him. "Yes, I obey." Zhao Zilong, without any doubt, respectfully replied upon hearing Chu Fan's words. He then remounted, leading the 3,000 White Horse Volunteers to clear the path ahead. Now that they could march at full speed, Zhao Zilong naturally wouldn't allow these miscellaneous troops ahead to obstruct their route. Subsequently, Chu Fan's carriage followed the army, constantly rushing towards Kaiyuan City. This time, their marching speed was far greater than before, arguably twice as fast as when they first set out. While Chu Fan and his group were rushing at full speed, on the other side, the army of the Prince of Jinbei's estate had already arrived at the Western Region border pass. Marshal Chu Hang, as the supreme commander of the army, looked at Jinshi Pass before him with a hint of emotion in his eyes. He never thought that one day he would be able to lead an army to this place. Although he had always wanted to conquer the entire Great Yin Imperial Dynasty for the Prince of Jinbei's estate, Chu Long had prevented them from acting all these years. No matter how much they wanted to move against the Great Yin Imperial Dynasty, they could only dream about it. Now that such an opportunity lay before them, Chu Hang looked at Jinshi Pass, naturally revealing a hint of excitement and thrill in his eyes. Not only did Chu Hang's eyes reveal excitement, but the eyes of the several generals beside him also showed excitement and thrill. As generals of the Prince of Jinbei's estate, they naturally hoped that the Prince of Jinbei's estate could replace Great Yin. In that case, they would at least have the merit of supporting a new dragon. All troops set up camp. Chu Hang excitedly glanced at Jinshi Pass and spoke to the generals behind him. We obey. The generals behind him, upon hearing his words, quickly went to lead the army in setting up camp. Chu Hang's army was quite far from Jinshi Pass, and their primary purpose in doing so was to avoid attracting attention from Jinshi Pass. Their goal was to capture Jinshi Pass with extreme speed. If Jinshi Pass reacted, it would take them a certain amount of time to take it down. Jinshi Pass could be said to be the gateway to the Western region, guarded by a 100,000-strong army. Of course, the most crucial factor was not the 100,000-strong army, but the natural barrier outside Jinshi Pass, which made it easy to defend and difficult to attack. As the army of the Prince of Jinbei's estate set up camp, night slowly fell. After darkness arrived, Chu Hang and several generals were discussing in the military camp how to capture Jinshi Pass. Some generals believed they should take Jinshi Pass under the cover of night, but Chu Hang felt this was inappropriate. After all, their large army did not have much confidence in taking Jinshi Pass under the cover of night, as the defending troops inside Jinshi Pass were not cowards. More importantly, they might be discovered by the army inside Jinshi Pass before even crossing that natural barrier. In that case, the army of the Prince of Jinbei's estate would truly fall into a passive position. Chapter 47: The easily defensible Jinshi Pass, where the Luo Wang, Net of Justice, and the Jinui, Imperial Guard, arrive one after another. As the marshal of the entire army, Marshal Chu Hang naturally knew that if Jinshi Pass could not be taken down as quickly as possible, then a prolonged war might await them. However, his prince and the young master could not afford to wait for them to fight a prolonged war. If they were to truly engage in a prolonged war with the Western region, then this military expedition would not hold much significance. Subsequently, the generals below continuously discussed how to attack Jinshi Pass, but no matter how they discussed, none of the ideas satisfied Marshal Chu Hang. For a time, the army of the Prince of Jinbei's estate fell into a predicament. After all, if they were to launch a forced attack now, it would truly be meaningless. Moreover, as the commander of these 600,000 troops, Marshal Chu Hang also did not wish for his army to suffer heavy losses. Reporting to the general, there is a person outside requesting an audience. This person claims to be from a young master. Just as Marshal Chu Hang was indecisive, a soldier suddenly entered and reported to Marshal Chu Hang. The eyes of all the generals were instantly drawn to this intruding soldier, and they looked at him with curious gazes. Someone from the young master? Let him in. Marshal Chu Hang's eyes instantly lit up when he heard the soldier's words, because he knew that Chu Long's decision to send troops this time was mainly due to his young master. Now that someone from his young master had come to find him, there must be something important, and Marshal Chu Hang naturally could not be negligent. After hearing Marshal Chu Hang's words, the soldier also instantly left the camp. The other generals also looked forward with anticipation to the arrival of this so-called young master's person. Amidst everyone's expectant gazes, a faint sound of footsteps quickly arrived outside the camp. The next second, a mysterious person in a black robe slowly came before Marshal Chu Hang and the others. At the same time, this mysterious person in a black robe also wore a spider pattern, clearly indicating that this person was from the Net of Luo. This subordinate greets this marshal. The Luo Wang assassin slowly bowed to Marshal Chu Hang. No matter what, Marshal Chu Hang was the marshal of this army, so even a Luo Wang assassin held a bit of reverence for him. How do you prove that you are from the young master? A glint of sharpness flashed in Marshal Chu Hang's eyes when he saw the Luo Wang assassin, and then he slowly asked the Luo Wang assassin. As the commander of the three armies, Marshal Chu Hang naturally could not so easily believe that the person in front of him was from the young master. What's more, the Luo Wang assassin in front of him had a bloodthirsty aura, and it was rare for such an aura to appear even in their army. The Luo Wang assassin was not annoyed by Marshal Chu Hang's words. Instead, he slowly took out a white jade pendant from his huai. On the front of this jade pendant, a character Chu was clearly carved, and on the other side, a character Fan was carved. This jade pendant was precisely the young master's token owned by Chu Fan. As a trusted subordinate of Chu Long from the Prince of Zhenbei's estate, Marshal Chu Hang had naturally seen this jade pendant. As for the other generals, they also looked at the Luo Wang assassin with curiosity. What instructions does the young master have? After looking at the jade pendant, Marshal Chu Hang returned it to the Luo Wang assassin, and then curiously asked the Luo Wang assassin, "The young master has ordered us to assist this marshal in conquering the western region. Jinshi Pass has already been infiltrated by us. As long as the general attacks Jinshi Pass, we can open the gates of Jinshi Pass." The Luo Wang assassin took back the jade pendant and put it back in his huai. His expression was full of reverence, clearly indicating that the jade pendant in front of him was an object of faith. Only after doing all this did he inform Marshal Chu Hang of his purpose for being there. "What did you say? You mean you can open the gates of Jinshi Pass at any time?" Marshal Chu Hang instantly could not sit still when he heard the Luo Wang assassin's words, and then he stood up and asked the Luo Wang assassin. The other generals, upon hearing the Luo Wang assassin's words, also looked at the Luo Wang assassin with disbelief. "That's right, but we don't have enough manpower to directly take Jinshi Pass. Otherwise, this marshal could go and take the pass now." The Luo Wang assassin showed no pride when he heard Marshal Chu Hang's words. Instead, he spoke with a hint of helplessness. "Can this marshal take Jinshi Pass now?" After hearing the Luo Wang assassin's affirmative words, a hint of excitement flashed in Marshal Chu Hang's eyes, and then he spoke to the Luo Wang assassin. "If this marshal wishes to take Jinshi Pass now, it is certainly possible. Moreover, at the moment the young master issued the order, our net of Luo had already gained control of roughly 10 cities in the western region. We are now just waiting for this marshal's army." The Luo Wang assassin confirmed his reply after hearing Marshal Chu Hang's words, and at the same time, a competitive spirit flashed in his eyes. Ever since Chu Fan summoned the embroidered uniform guard, the net of Luo and the embroidered uniform guard had been secretly competing, and the content of their competition was very simple. For example, this time, the ultimate stake in their competition was to see whether the embroidered uniform guard or the net of Luo took more cities in the western region. It was also for this reason that the net of Luo managed to control more than 10 cities in the western region in such a short period of time. This subordinate takes his leave. "I hope this marshal will come to take the city at midnight tonight." The Luo Wang assassin looked at the somewhat stunned Marshal Chu Hang, slowly cupped his hands, and spoke, after which he disappeared from the military camp. It was only after a while that the Luo Wang assassin had left that the military camp reacted. "Marshal, shall we send troops at midnight?" At this moment, a general carefully stood up and asked Marshal Chu Hang. The other generals also looked at Marshal Chu Hang with curiosity after hearing this general's words. "Go!" Marshal Chu Hang slowly uttered a single word, looking in the direction where the Luo Wang assassin had left. All the generals were also excited upon hearing Marshal Chu Hang's words. If it was truly as the person had just said, then their journey would be very smooth. Just as Marshal Chu Hang and the others began to decide how to attack Jinshi Pass, a figure in an embroidered uniform suddenly appeared in the military camp. This person stared coldly at Marshal Chu Hang. "Jinyi Thousand Household Commander greets this marshal." The figure in the embroidered uniform slowly spoke, looking at Marshal Chu Hang and the other generals who had become vigilant. Marshal Chu Hang and the others, upon hearing what the figure in the embroidered uniform said, also looked at the figure with some confusion. This marshal must have just met someone from the net of Luo. The embroidered uniform guard also belongs to the young master. This trip to this marshal is mainly to inform this marshal that Shili City and the dozens of cities behind Shili City have been secretly controlled by the embroidered uniform guard. We hope this marshal will quickly send troops to take the cities. The Jinui Thousand Household Commander slowly spoke, looking at Marshal Chu Hang and the others. After speaking, the Jinui Thousand Household Commander also directly disappeared from the military camp. Chapter 48, Capturing Jinshi Pass, Dividing Forces for an Attack. It wasn't until a quarter of an hour after the embroidered uniform guard left that Marshal Chu Hang and his entourage finally reacted. "Marshal, is this embroidered uniform guard real? Are the things he said actually true?" The same general who had just spoken carefully stepped forward and questioned Marshal Chu Hang. "Perhaps it is true, but we need to capture Jinshi Pass before we can prove it." At this moment, let alone the generals, even Marshal Chu Hang himself was completely bewildered. He had not expected the existence of the embroidered uniform guard after the appearance of the net of Luo. One must know that the entire Western territory only consisted of 60-odd cities, and now the net of Luo and the embroidered uniform guard could easily capture about 20 of them. If this were true, Wouldn't the army of the Prince of Jinbei's estate quickly conquer the Western Territory? As time slowly passed, the hour of midnight quickly arrived. Marshal Chu Hang immediately led the 600,000 Jinbei army troops behind him directly toward Jinshi Pass. Even if the news just sent by the net of Luo was not true, he still intended to rely on his great army to take it down directly. The army traveled very quickly, arriving at the strategic choke point of Jinshi Pass in just a moment. Upon arriving, Marshal Chu Hang saw that the city gate at the choke point was wide open, and the air was filled with a strong smell of blood, clearly indicating that a major battle had just taken place here. A look of surprise flashed across Marshal Chu Hang's face as he took all this in. Following that, he led the army behind him directly toward the strategic choke point of Jinshi Pass. Arriving at the strategic choke point, an even greater look of shock appeared on Marshal Chu Hang's face. Countless corpses lay next to the city gate at the choke point, their blood splattered everywhere. Marshal, was all this done by the net of Luo? A general, stunned by the corpses covering the ground near the city gate, asked Marshal Chu Hang. It should be true. Let us quickly capture Jinshi Pass. Otherwise, we will waste this excellent opportunity. Marshal Chu Hang looked at the corpses in front of him and promptly gave orders to the army behind him. The news the net of Luo had just sent him stated that the net of Luo lacked sufficient manpower, which was why they were unable to directly capture Jinshi Pass. Judging by the current situation, Marshal Chu Hang knew that the net of Luo must have only secured the area around the city gate. Therefore, the army of the Prince of Jinbei's estate could not stop now. As expected, just as Marshal Chu Hang and the others' army entered Jinshi Pass, they saw that the troops inside Jinshi Pass were still systematically patrolling the surroundings. However, these troops had absolutely no idea that the gate of Jinshi Pass had already been breached. Is this the net of Luo in the hands of the air? It truly is terrifying. Even if I were guarding Jinshi Pass, such a situation might still occur. Marshal Chu Hang thought with dread as he looked at the enemy troops who had yet to notice them. At the same time, he also felt a thrill of excitement. With such a terrifying net of Luo on their side, didn't that mean they could easily seize cities? Lu Hongji, this marshal now grants you 200,000 troops. I want you to completely control everything inside the city within 1 hour. Zhao Xinyan, this marshal similarly grants you 200,000 troops. I want you to completely secure the city lord's estate of Jinshi Pass within 1 hour. Looking at the troops ahead, a flash of killing intent appeared in Marshal Chu Hang's eyes. Following that, he gave orders to the 2 Grotto Heaven Realm generals beside him. Your subordinate general accepts the order. Upon hearing Marshal Chu Hang's command, the 2 Grotto Heaven Realm generals excitedly led their troops and immediately set off. As for Marshal Chu Hang, he led the remaining troops slowly along the main road of Jinshi Pass. Now that the city gate of Jinshi Pass had been breached, they had entered Jinshi Pass without any loss. Capturing Jinshi Pass was now only a matter of time. As the 2 armies entered Jinshi Pass, the slaughter within Jinshi Pass began immediately. Shouts of slaughter echoed throughout the night. Jinshi Pass was anything but peaceful that night. And after this night, the entire Jinshi Pass changed hands and became a territory of the Prince of Jinbei's estate. Early the next morning, the sunlight shone upon Jinshi Pass, illuminating the dilapidated environment so brightly. At this time, Marshal Chu Hang had already led several generals to the city lord's estate of Jinshi Pass. At this moment, the faces of the generals standing below Marshal Chu Hang were glowing with excitement. They had not expected to capture Jinshi Pass so easily. Even Marshal Chu Hang himself wore a look of being lost in a dream. He had fought battles his whole life and never expected to capture a city in front of him so effortlessly. Next, we need to capture the cities secretly controlled by the net of Luo and the embroidered uniform guard at the fastest possible speed. Although they have secretly taken control of these cities, they clearly do not have many troops to directly manage them. Therefore, now is the time to test us. After quite a while, Marshal Chu Hang finally snapped out of his daze and spoke seriously to the generals below him. Reporting to the general, your subordinate requests a mission. Lu Hongji stepped forward at this moment and spoke excitedly to Marshal Chu Hang. After capturing Jinshi Pass so easily, he now believed the words of the net of Luo and the embroidered uniform guard, and he was eager to demonstrate his own strength. After hearing Lu Hongji's words, the other generals quickly stood up to request missions as well. In such a simple war, they naturally wanted to compete for some merit. Lu Hongji, this marshal commands you to be the vanguard, leading 100,000 troops to advance toward the southeast of the Western Territory. This marshal demands that you capture every city preemptively controlled by the net of Luo at the fastest speed. Marshal Chu Hang looked at Lu Hongji in front of him and slowly issued his command. Your subordinate accepts the order. Your subordinate will absolutely not disappoint the marshal. Lu Hongzhi happily accepted the command. Following that, he quickly left the city lord's estate, holding his token. The other generals looked at the departing Lu Hongzhi with envious expressions, then all turned their eager gazes toward Marshal Chu Hang above them. Zhao Xinyan, you will similarly lead 100,000 troops and advance toward the south. You must quickly take control of every city secretly managed by the net of Luo, and eventually link up with Lu Hongzhi. Marshal Chu Hang looked at the eager gazes before him, then slowly addressed the deputy general, his eyes also filled with excitement. Zhao Xinyan excitedly accepted Marshal Chu Hang's command and quickly left the city lord's estate. Clearly, he also wanted to capture his target cities, this time at the fastest speed possible. Wang Feng, this marshal, Zhan Peng. Marshal Chu Hang then divided the remaining troops entirely. Following that, 6 armies were seen advancing directly towards 6 different directions in the Western Territory. As for Jinshi Pass, it was controlled by the 30,000 troops left behind by Marshal Chu Hang. With the secret cooperation of the net of Luo, 30,000 troops were already enough to secure Jinshi Pass. Chapter 49, Chu Long Shock. Chu Fan arrives in Kaiyuan City. Subsequently, Marshal Chu Hang's army divided into 4 routes and directly attacked the western region. Of course, the news of him capturing Jinshi Pass was also sent back to the Prince of Jinbei's estate. It seems we still underestimated the power in Chu Fan's hands. The strength of the net of Luo and the embroidered uniform guard is in no way inferior to the secret guards of my Prince of Jinbei's estate. Old Prince of Jinbei, Chu Long, who received the news, showed a trace of complexity in his eyes, but behind that complexity, there was mostly joy. He hadn't expected his own grandson to have cultivated such a powerful force. One must know that even the secret guards of the Prince of Jinbei's estate couldn't achieve this. Yet the net of Luo and the embroidered uniform guard in Chu Fan's hands could easily do so, which greatly astonished Chu Long. However, what Chu Long didn't know was that Chu Fan had distributed the embroidered uniform guard and the net of Luo throughout the entire Eastern domain. Otherwise, relying solely on the net of Luo and the embroidered uniform guard, he could capture the entire western region, and it would even be possible to take down the entire Great Yin Dynasty. It seems that in this major war, the army of the Prince of Jinbei's estate will successfully capture most of the western region. After hearing Chu Long's words, Jia Qiming also nodded, and a glimmer of excitement appeared in his eyes. Initially, he had been slightly worried about the Prince of Jinbei's estate deploying troops. Although he knew that Chu Fan had 2 Dharma aspect realm existences by his side, capturing the entire western region in the shortest time possible still seemed somewhat unlikely. After all, while the western region's strength might not match the Prince of Jinbei's estate, their power was by no means weak. Moreover, the Prince of Jinbei's estate did not mobilize all its forces this time. Otherwise, what troops would the Prince of Jinbei's estate use to resist the Tianqing dynasty? All of this was within the calculations of old Prince Jinbei. After all, the news of the Prince of Jinbei's estate deploying troops to the western region would surely spread throughout the world quickly. At that time, the Tianqing dynasty, having such an opportunity, wouldn't possibly ignore it. This was also why the Prince of Jinbei's estate kept more than half of its army behind. However, with the addition of Chu Fan's net of Luo and the embroidered uniform guard, Jia Qiming and Chu Long no longer felt worried. It's just that I don't know if Chu Fan and the others can withstand that old fellow's attack in Kaiyuan City. That old fellow is leading hundreds of thousands of troops to pursue the 2 of them this time. At this moment, Chu Long slowly turned his gaze towards the direction of the western region, his eyes filled with worry. Although he had absolute confidence in his grandson, this time he was facing the old king of Jinshi's army of 200,000. Yet, his grandson only had 3,000 troops by his side. Such an army seemed incredibly small compared to the 200,000 troops accompanying the old king of Jinshi. Your Highness, don't worry. Since Chu Fan made this decision early on, he definitely has his own plans. Moreover, with mysterious entities like the net of Luo and the embroidered uniform guard by his side, he must have already calculated how to deal with the 200,000 troops accompanying the old king of Jinshi. Although Jia Qiming also held some worry in his eyes, he still slowly spoke to comfort Chu Long. I hope so. We must capture the western region before the eastern domain prodigy battle this time. Otherwise, we won't have such a good opportunity after the heavenly prodigy battle concludes. After hearing Jia Qiming's words, Chu Long nodded, then slowly gazed toward the imperial palace of the Great Yin Dynasty. The time left for them was running short. Even if the imperial family of the Great Yin Dynasty discovered the news of their attack on the western region before the eastern domain prodigy battle arrived, it would be too late to send troops to suppress it. It could even be said that, for the sake of the upcoming heavenly prodigy battle, the Great Yin Dynasty might delay deploying troops. However, as soon as this heavenly prodigy battle ends, The Great Yin Dynasty will certainly tear apart all pretenses with the Prince of Junbei's estate, and a major war between the two powers will commence. Jia Qiming naturally understood his lord's concerns, but at this point, they had no retreat. After all, the army had already entered the western region. Now, they could only pray that the army of the Prince of Junbei's estate would resolve the western region as quickly as possible. Simultaneously, Chu Fan and the others on the other side also entered Kaiyuan City. Due to their deliberate actions, the old king of Jinshi was only half a day slower than them in arriving outside Kaiyuan City. After entering Kaiyuan City, Chu Fan immediately handed over all the city's troops to Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu for handling, simultaneously throwing the task of defending the city to the two of them. After all, the total number of soldiers in Kaiyuan City, combined with the Bingzhou Iron Cavalry and the White Horse Volunteers, was only tens of thousands, so now was not the time for them to go out and fight the old king of Jinshi's army. Of course, if all these troops were the Bingzhou Iron Cavalry, Chu Fan would certainly choose to have Lu Bu lead the army out to charge and kill, but these troops were not the Bingzhou Iron Cavalry. Their strength was even inferior to the army brought by the old king of Jinshi outside. Chu Tianxiong and Chu Fan both ran into Kaiyuan City. How infuriating. In a large tent outside Kaiyuan City, the old king of Jinshi looked toward Kaiyuan City with an expression of anger and unwillingness, shouting furiously, "Your Highness, once they entered Kaiyuan City, they have no wings to fly away. How could they possibly escape now, since the entire Kaiyuan City has been surrounded by our army?" A strategist beside the old king of Jinshi slowly stepped forward and spoke. At this moment, Kaiyuan City had been besieged by the Jinshi army, and he refused to believe that Chu Fan and Chu Tianxiong could still escape under these circumstances. That's right. I just didn't expect the city lord of Kaiyuan City to actually let Chu Fan and Chu Tianxiong enter. It seems this city lord of Kaiyuan City defected to the Prince of Junbei's estate long ago. Another general slowly stepped forward and spoke after hearing the strategist's words, and a look of indignation appeared on his face. No, Kaiyuan City is permeated with the smell of blood. Clearly, a major battle occurred in Kaiyuan City not long ago. This king speculates that Kaiyuan City has probably already fallen into the hands of the Prince of Junbei's estate. The old king of Jinshi was, after all, an existence capable of fighting the old Prince of Junbei, Chu Long. He frowned and slowly spoke. At this moment, he naturally noticed that something was amiss with Kaiyuan City. After all, if Kaiyuan City had truly defected to the Prince of Junbei's estate, then Kaiyuan City would not have such a heavy smell of blood right now. More importantly, if Kaiyuan City had defected to the Prince of Junbei's estate, then the 100,000 troops currently inside Kaiyuan City could fight against him. The fact that the Kaiyuan City troops had not appeared meant that although the Prince of Junbei's estate had captured Kaiyuan City in this major battle, they had also paid a price. The Prince of Junbei's estate's army was currently unable to fight against them, which was why the Kaiyuan City troops were staying inside Kaiyuan City and not mobilizing. Chapter 50: The Old Town King's Vigilance. Guijia's two major solutions. After hearing the analysis of the old king of Jinshi, the other generals also turned their gazes towards him. "Your Highness, what should we do now?" A middle-aged general slowly stepped forward and inquired of the old king of Jinshi. "Have the scouts investigate the army dispatched by the Prince of Junbei's estate this time. First, confirm the size of the force the Prince of Junbei's estate sent to see exactly how many troops are inside Kaiyuan City. If there are few troops inside Kaiyuan City, we will attack directly. But if there are many troops inside Kaiyuan City, we will mobilize more forces. I refuse to believe that the entire army of the Prince of Junbei's estate is contained within Kaiyuan City." The old king of Jinshi slowly spoke after hearing the general's words. At this moment, his eyes were filled with malice. Clearly, he would not let Chu Tianxiong or Chu Fan escape, no matter what. The old king of Jinshi truly lived up to his reputation as an old fox. He was not impulsive like his son, choosing instead to first clarify how many soldiers were inside Kaiyuan City before making a decision. Subsequently, the West Town King's estate army remained stationed outside Kaiyuan City without making any moves, as if merely besieging Chu Fan and the others was sufficient. Several days quickly passed, and during this time, the West Town King's estate army made no movements whatsoever. Lu Bu, who was guarding Kaiyuan City, was somewhat surprised to see the West Town King's estate army completely motionless. According to his conjecture, the West Town King's estate army should have launched an attack on the second day. But now 4 or 5 days had passed, and the West Town King's estate army still hadn't moved. This left Lu Bu, who was already simple-minded, even more bewildered. As a fellow general defending Kaiyuan City, Zhao Zilong was not as impatient as Lu Bu. He monitored the movements below every day. Watching the inactive West Town King's estate army, Zhao Zilong was not overly concerned. Instead, he instructed his soldiers to keep a close watch on the West Town King's estate army daily. Inside the Lord's mansion of Kaiyuan City, Chu Fan, Chu Tianxiong, and the others had also been there for 5 or 6 days. The fact that Kaiyuan City had not been attacked during these past few days also surprised Chu Tianxiong. Tell me, what movements has the old king of Jinshi made? In the back garden of the Lord's mansion, Chu Fan slowly spoke while looking at the Luo Wang assassin in front of him. Chu Tianxiong, standing nearby, also looked at the Luo Wang assassin with anticipation. Reporting to young master, the old king of Jinshi noticed the anomaly in Kaiyuan City, so he sent scouts to investigate whether the prince of Jinbei's estate had mobilized troops. The scouts have not returned yet, which is why the old king of Jinshi has remained stationed outside without action. The Luo Wang assassin slowly reported the information they had gathered to Chu Fan. He truly is an old fox. It seems he has noticed that something is amiss with Kaiyuan City, which is why he dares not attack rashly. I suspect he has already guessed that Kaiyuan City now belongs to our prince of Jinbei's estate, and that's why he needs to find out how many troops the prince of Jinbei's estate dispatched, so he can decide whether or not to send troops to attack Kaiyuan City. After hearing the words from the net of Luo, Chu Fan instantly understood the old king of Jinshi's plan, and he spoke with a hint of helplessness. At the same time, Chu Fan realized he had underestimated the old king of Jinshi. His decision not to attack is precisely the best outcome for us, as we don't have many troops in Kaiyuan City. Chu Tianxiong secretly breathed a sigh of relief upon hearing the reported news. After all, the old king of Jinshi, currently outside Kaiyuan City, was leading an army of 200,000, while their combined forces in Kaiyuan City only amounted to slightly over 40,000. It would still be quite difficult to rely on these 40,000 troops to withstand the 200,000-strong army led by the old king of Jinshi. Of course, if those 40,000 troops were the White Horse Volunteers, Chu Tianxiong would definitely lead such a force in a battle without hesitation. However, among these 40,000-plus troops, over 30,000 were the former army of Kaiyuan City, and in Chu Tianxiong's opinion, such troops were truly too weak. Guo Jia's courtesy name. Do you have a plan? Chu Fan did not agree with his father's words. Instead, he slowly shifted his gaze toward Guo Jia, who was currently drinking wine beside him. After hearing Chu Fan's words, Chu Tianxiong also slowly looked toward Guo Jia. Although Guo Jia currently resembled a drunkard, Chu Tianxiong dared not underestimate Guo Jia. After all, this man was a genius capable of strategizing, and also a terrifying spirit roaming realm sorcerer. Does young master wish for the West Town King's estate army to attack or retreat? Guo Jia slowly set down the wine jar in his hand after hearing Chu Fan's words, then looked at Chu Fan with a calm expression and asked, "What if I wish for the West Town King's estate army to attack Kaiyuan City?" Chu Fan slowly spoke while looking at the calm Guo Jia, realizing at the same time that Guo Jia already had a plan. After Chu Fan's words fell, a look of worry instantly appeared on Chu Tianxiong's face, but thinking about Chu Fan's ability to create miracles in difficult situations, he chose not to speak. Instead, he quietly watched Guo Jia, wanting to see what kind of idea Guo Jia could come up with. "Young master, if you wish for the king of Jinshi's army to attack Kaiyuan City, you only need to have the net of Luo deliver one piece of news to the king of Jinshi's army. Of course, if young master wishes for the king of Jinshi's army to retreat, the net of Luo only needs to deliver 2 pieces of news to the king of Jinshi's army." Guo Jia picked up the wine jar in his hand, took a drink, and then slowly spoke. "You intend to have the net of Luo deliver false information to the king of Jinshi's army." Hearing Guo Jia's words, Chu Fan instantly understood. He spoke to Guo Jia with a slight smile, and a calculating look appeared in his eyes. "Exactly. If young master wishes for the old king of Jinshi to attack Kaiyuan City, just have a net of Luo deliver one piece of news to the old king of Jinshi, saying that the prince of Jinbei's estate mobilized 50,000 troops to attack Kaiyuan City, and only managed to take Kaiyuan City after a fierce battle that resulted in mutual heavy losses. Now, the defending soldiers are all the troops Kaiyuan City has left. If that is the case, how could the old king of Jinshi resist such a temptation?" Guo Jia slowly stood up and analyzed the situation. After finishing his analysis, he continued speaking to Chu Fan. "However, if young master wishes for the old king of Jinshi to retreat, it is also very simple. Just have a net of Luo deliver 2 pieces of news to the old king of Jinshi. One piece of news would be that the prince of Jinbei's estate mobilized hundreds of thousands of troops to attack Kaiyuan City, easily taking it down, and is now waiting for him to attack. The other piece of news would be that the Grand Marshal of the Tianqing dynasty is currently organizing his forces. While their target is uncertain, it is likely the western borders." After Guo Jia finished speaking, he sat back down in his original spot and resumed drinking. Meanwhile, Chu Tianxiong was completely engrossed in the tactics Guo Jia had just described. Chapter 51 Guojia's Plan, Chu Fan's Trump Card, Chu Lushan, and 100,000 Northern Liang Cavalry. As for Chu Fan on the other side, he had already understood Guojia's meaning at this time, so he naturally chose the first plan. After all, if the old king of Jinshi were to return, then the prince of Jinbei's estate sending troops would not have much effect. What's more, Chu Fan still had a huge trump card. Net of Luo, send the first message to the old king of Jinshi. After that, Chu Fan also made his decision directly. Guojia was not too surprised by Chu Fan's decision, because when he thought of these two plans, he knew which one Chu Fan would use. However, Chu Tianxiong, who was beside them, showed a hint of worry on his face, because if this happened, the old king of Jinshi's army would definitely attack Kaiyuan City directly. With Kaiyuan City's current strength, it really might not be able to hold out. But seeing the firm look in his son's eyes, he no longer worried too much. At this time, Chu Tianxiong also knew that if Chu Fan wasn't very confident, he would never choose to take such a risk. This could be seen from the great battles of these past few days. Next, the net of Luo directly disguised itself as a spy from the old king of Jinshi's estate and delivered the message to the old king of Jinshi. Upon receiving the message, the gloomy expression on the old king of Jinshi's face instantly disappeared, replaced by a smug look. Chu Fan, Chu Tianxiong, this time neither of you will have a chance to escape. I wonder what that old fellow Chu Long will think when you two fall on my western territory. It will also let him experience the feeling of having no descendants. The old king of Jinshi did not doubt his spy at all. Instead, he looked at Kaiyuan City in front of him with an air of certainty. After all, the spy had already sent the message, so he naturally wouldn't sit idly by. Otherwise, he would truly fall into the Prince of Jinbei's trap. But what he didn't know was that the message he had just received from the spy had already led him into the trap. Next, the old king of Jinshi also gathered his entire army and then majestically rushed towards Kaiyuan City. The old king of Jinshi, upon learning that the army inside Kaiyuan City was very weak, had no intention of hiding his route. He wanted to take Kaiyuan City in front of him as quickly as possible, and then use the heads of Chu Fan and Chu Tianxiong to offer sacrifices to his son and grandson. Of course, the moment the mighty Jinshi army appeared, it immediately attracted Zhao Zilong's attention. So he immediately sent soldiers to report to his young master. Chu Fan in the city lord's mansion naturally received the news very quickly. I didn't expect the net of Luo's message to be so effective. In just one day, this old fellow fell for it. It seems this old fellow is already impatient. A smile instantly appeared on Chu Fan's face when he heard the soldiers report. Everything was under his control. Chu Lushan, are the Northern Liang Iron Cavalry ready? Chu Fan gently waved his hand, dismissing the soldier in front of him, and then looked at the fat beside him and asked. The fat beside him was burly, looking like a round ball. Young master, rest assured, your subordinate general's Northern Liang Iron Cavalry is ready at any time, just waiting for the Jinshi army to attack Kaiyuan City. Chu Lushan's chubby face jiggled as he heard Chu Fan's words, and a fervent look appeared in his eyes. At this moment, he seemed like a demon, constantly licking the corners of his mouth. If that's the case, then let the world see the shock the Northern Liang Iron Cavalry brings. After hearing Chu Lushan's words, an excited expression also appeared on Chu Fan's face, and then he stood up and walked out with Chu Lushan. Chu Lushan was Chu Fan's trump card for daring to confront the Jinshi army this time. Chu Lushan was a character summoned by Chu Fan during this month's summoning opportunity. His cultivation had reached the Xinyu Perfect Realm, just one step away from reaching the half-step Faxiang Realm. Of course, the most important thing was not Chu Lushan, who had reached the Xinyu Perfect Realm. The most important thing was that besides him reaching the Xinyu Perfect Realm, he also brought with him 100,000 Northern Liang Iron Cavalry. In other words, this time, Chu Fan summoned not only Chu Lushan of the Xinyu Perfect Realm, but also those 100,000 Northern Liang Iron Cavalry. Chu Lushan, one of the peerless commanders in the world of snow, perhaps he was not as famous as Chen Jipao, but his commanding ability could rival Chen Jipao's. After all, in the world of snow, only he could contend with Chen Jipao in Northern Liang. What's more, he once led 1,000 cavalry to conquer Shu, leaving behind the esteemed reputation of 1,000 cavalry opening Shu. Therefore, Chu Lushan was a peerless commander no matter what. In Chu Fan's opinion, Chu Lushan's ability might not be inferior to those famous generals in history. Of course, what Chu Fan valued even more was the 100,000 Northern Liang Iron Cavalry that Chu Lushan brought forth. With the existence of the 100,000 Northern Liang Iron Cavalry, Chu Fan finally had an army under his control. Although he had already summoned Lu Bu and obtained the Bingzhou Iron Cavalry, and summoned Zhao Zilong and obtained 3,000 White Horse righteous followers at the very beginning. However, the numbers of those two armies were not very large. when it came to real major battles, the numbers of the two armies were still too small. Now, the appearance of the 100,000 Northern Liang Iron Cavalry just made up for this deficiency. Before long, Chu Fan led Chu Lushan to the city wall of Kaiyuan City. At this time, Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu were guarding the two city gates of Kaiyuan City respectively. As for the other two city gates that the Jinshi army hadn't focused on, Chu Fan had Su Chu and Dian Wei guard them separately. After all, who knew if the Jinshi army would attack the other two city gates? And at this time, the East Gate, which Zhao Zilong was guarding, was the East Gate where the old king of Jinshi was leading his mighty army to attack. At this moment, Chu Tianxiong, Shangguan Qingsheng, and others were all on the city wall, observing the movements below. After all, this great battle would determine their lives and deaths, so they naturally couldn't remain indifferent. When they saw Chu Fan leading a spherical fat, the others also looked in Chu Fan's direction with confusion. "Greetings, young master." Zhao Zilong, on the other hand, stepped forward directly, bowed to Chu Fan, and spoke softly. Chu Fan waved his hand at Zhao Zilong, and then slowly walked onto the city wall with Chu Lushan, looking at the mighty army rushing towards them below. "Chu Lushan, how long will it take to deal with them?" Chu Fan looked at the mighty army below with no ripples in his eyes and slowly asked Chu Lushan beside him. Chu Fan knew that the Northern Liang Iron Cavalry's combat power would not be weaker than these Jinshi army soldiers outside, which was why he asked Chu Lushan such a question. "Young master, give your subordinate general 3 hours, and your subordinate general will definitely present that old fellow's head to young master." Chu Lushan looked at the mighty Jinshi army below, a wicked smile forming on his lips, and then he earnestly assured Chu Fan. Chapter 52, Chu Tianxiong questions Chu Lushan. Chu Fan is angry at the old prince of Jinshi. Chu Lushan's voice was especially loud. Everyone around heard his voice, and Chu Tianxiong frowned even harder as he looked at Chu Lushan standing before him. Although he felt that the people Chu Fan brought were very strong, upon hearing Chu Lushan's words, Chu Tianxiong still felt that this person was exaggerating. After all, there were 200,000 Jinshi army troops outside. Not just Chu Tianxiong, even Shangguan Qingsheng and the others felt that the fatty in front of them was boasting. However, what they didn't know was why Chu Fan trusted this fatty so much to be able to deal with the army outside. As for Zhao Zilong, he completely trusted his young master. After all, he was also a figure summoned by his young master, so he naturally did not dare to look down on the fatty before him. "Good. This heir apparent will give you one day." Chu Fan paid no attention to the expressions on everyone's faces. He simply patted Chu Lushan's shoulder and said loudly. At the same time, Chu Fan's eyes were filled with curiosity and anticipation. He also wanted to see just how powerful the legendary Northern Liang Iron Cavalry truly was. And at the same time, Chu Fan began to anticipate when he would be able to summon the legendary Great Snow Dragon Cavalry. After all, that was the strongest army in the entire Snowy Realm, and Chu Fan believed that the Great Snow Dragon Cavalry was definitely not weaker than the White Horse Volunteers. After all, a saying circulated in that world: when the Great Snow Dragon Cavalry reaches 10,000, it is invincible. In other words, as long as the Great Snow Dragon Cavalry reached 10,000 men, it would be an invincible existence. However, Chu Fan guessed that summoning Chun Jibao would likely be required to summon the Great Snow Dragon Cavalry. This subordinate will certainly not disappoint this heir apparent. Feeling the hand on his shoulder, Chu Lushan immediately knelt down in gratitude and bowed toward Chu Fan. Then, with a look of determination, he directly descended the city wall. A smile appeared on Chu Fan's face as he watched Chu Lushan's retreating figure, and then he slowly walked a few more steps forward. He stared intently at the king of Jinshi's massive army, approaching his position below. Brat, can he really deal with the king of Jinshi's massive army down there? Chu Tianxiong watched the departing Chu Lushan, slowly walked up, and asked Chu Fan, a look of worry showing in his brows. Shangguan Qingsheng and Luo Tianyi also looked at Chu Fan with worried expressions, though besides worry, their feelings were mostly curiosity. "Father, relax. Chu Lushan's command ability is in no way inferior to yours, and besides, I trust his Northern Liang Iron Cavalry." Chu Fan replied slowly after hearing Chu Tianxiong's words, and while saying this, he did not forget to tease Chu Tianxiong. Chu Tianxiong's command ability might be good, but compared to Chu Lushan, he might genuinely be slightly weaker. This wasn't to say that Chu Tianxiong was weak. The main reason was that this world lacked as many tactical schemes as his previous life. Then I shall wait and see. I want to see exactly what merits this fatty possesses to be compared to me. After hearing Chu Fan's words, the worry in Chu Tianxiong's eyes dissipated. He slowly approached the city wall and looked at the army below. At this moment, he was also curious about the true capabilities of that fatty. The battlefield is always changing rapidly. As time slowly passed, the old king of Jinshi led the 200,000-strong army behind him to the front of Kaiyuan City. Chu Fan, standing on the city wall, was somewhat surprised as he looked at the old general wearing the golden battle armor who was commanding the center of the army. This was the first time he had seen the old king of Jinshi. The old king of Jinshi was not as frail and weak as rumored. Instead, he looked very spirited, like a lion about to awaken. As Chu Fan looked toward the old king of Jinshi, the old king of Jinshi, who was currently in the central army camp, naturally also saw Chu Fan and his father on the city wall. He slowly rode his warhorse toward Kaiyuan City, accompanied by 2 old generals beside him. When he reached 100 zhang outside the gates of Kaiyuan City, the old king of Jinshi slowly halted his advance, his gaze filled with hatred as he looked at Chu Fan and his father on the city wall. Chu Tianxiong, it is still not too late to surrender now. Otherwise, once this old man breaks through Kaiyuan City, I will surely have you torn into 10,000 pieces. The old king of Jinshi gritted his teeth and spoke as he looked at Chu Tianxiong on the city wall, his voice filled with rage. If looks could kill, then Chu Tianxiong on the city wall would probably already have been torn into 10,000 pieces. As for Chu Fan, who was standing beside Chu Tianxiong, he was completely ignored by the old king of Jinshi. After all, Chu Fan's title of martial arts fanatic wasn't just for show. The old king of Jinshi simply did not believe that the one who killed his grandson and son was Chu Fan. It could be said that this blame was pinned directly onto Chu Tianxiong by the old king of Jinshi. I say, old general, when you get old, you should go back and rest properly, or what if you accidentally kick the bucket? Also, when you get old, you should accumulate some good karma with your words, or else the one who accidentally gets torn into 10,000 pieces one day might be you. Chu Fan looked at the old general wearing the golden battle armor outside the city wall and retorted mercilessly, his eyes even carrying a hint of pity, as if he genuinely felt sorry for the old king of Jinshi outside. After the old king of Jinshi heard Chu Fan's words, the rage in his heart instantly flared up, and he glared furiously at Chu Fan. Why are you glaring at this heir apparent? Everything this heir apparent said is sound life advice. I imagine, old general, you don't want to go see your son and grandson so quickly, right? Chu Fan continued speaking to the old king of Jinshi, who was already enraged by his words. His language was truly vicious. Oh, this heir apparent understands now. You want to go down and see your son and grandson. Since you want to see your grandson and son so badly, why don't you just take a knife and kill yourself? Chu Fan patted his head, as if he had just thought of something, and continued speaking to the furious old king of Jinshi below. Chu Tianxiong, Shangwan Qingxiong, and the others looked at Chu Fan with strange expressions after hearing his words. They had never expected Chu Fan to be so venomous with his words. Even if they were in the old king of Jinshi's position, they would probably be half dead from anger due to Chu Fan. You are Chu Long's martial arts fanatic grandson. I never expected Chu Long to have such an idiotic grandson. It took the old king of Jinshi quite a while to finally suppress the anger in his heart, and then he looked at Chu Fan and spoke angrily. Old general, you are mistaken. This heir apparent is not only a martial arts fanatic, but this heir apparent is also the culprit who is about to bury the entire West Town King's estate. Chu Fan felt no great anger upon hearing the old king of Jinshi's words. Instead, he looked at the old king of Jinshi below with a playful expression and said, "Oh, right, Murong Ci was killed by this heir apparent." At the time, he kept begging this heir apparent to spare him, but this heir apparent thought about it and decided to send him down to be reborn into a wealthy family instead. Chapter 53, Guojia displays his power. Guojia's mischievous interest. Chu Fan's despicable appearance made even Chu Tianxiong, who was next to him, want to kick him. However, for some unknown reason, Chu Tianxiong felt extremely comfortable inside right now. The old king of Jinshi was so infuriated by Chu Fan that he nearly fell off his horse, his finger tremblingly pointing at Chu Fan on the city wall. At this moment, he couldn't even utter a word. Clearly, Chu Fan had truly enraged him. Sure enough, when people get old, they shouldn't wander around casually, or they might accidentally kick the bucket. Old man, hurry back and recuperate, lest you die here in Kaiyuan City. What bad luck. Seeing the old king of Jinshi's appearance below, Chu Fan continued to speak despicably, not forgetting to make a look of disdain after finishing his sentence. The old king of Jinshi was naturally truly enraged by Chu Fan at this point, so he slowly rode his warhorse back into his formation. At this moment, he no longer intended to continue speaking with Chu Fan. Otherwise, he might genuinely be angered to death by Chu Fan. That's right. It's good that you're leaving, saving you from dying outside my Kaiyuan City. Chu Fan watched the departing old king of Jinshi and continued to speak unforgivingly. This caused the old king of Jinshi, who was about to enter his army, to tremble and the ferocity in his eyes was exposed even more completely. "Everyone, attack and kill. Leave that little beast alive for this king." The old king of Jinshi immediately issued the order upon returning to his army, simultaneously pointing at Chu Fan and speaking through gritted teeth. At this moment, he wished he could tear Chu Fan on the city wall into 10,000 pieces. And the large army beside him instantly charged directly toward Kaiyuan City upon hearing his command. Trebuchets were also immediately pushed out, and massive stones weighing tens of thousands of pounds were hurled over. Chu Fan, seeing this scene from the city wall, was somewhat shaken. If they were mortals, they probably truly couldn't withstand these massive stones weighing tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of pounds. But the people on their city wall were not mortals. They even had the existence of Zhao Zilong, who was in the Dharma aspect realm. Water gathering technique, condense. Guo Jia on the city wall looked at the massive stones flying over like meteors from the sky and unhurriedly formed hand seals. Immediately afterward, the river water in the moat below began to condense into a water wall. This water wall directly blocked the massive stones flying over like meteors from the sky. This prevented the massive stones from advancing even a single step toward Kaiyuan City. It was as if they were all frozen in the air ahead. Sorcerer. I didn't expect the Prince of Jinbei's estate to have a sorcerer. The old king of Jinshi was also very surprised to see this scene. He hadn't expected to encounter a sorcerer in Kaiyuan City. In that case, the subsequent attack might be troublesome. However, he did not stop the trebuchets. Instead, he ordered them to increase their force. He refused to believe that the sorcerer inside Kaiyuan City could withstand the massive stones hurled by so many trebuchets. However, he severely underestimated Guo Jia's strength. Guo Jia looked relaxed as he gazed at the water wall in front of him. While outside the wall, massive stones crashed against it one after another. The instant these massive stones collided with the water wall, a great amount of spray was generated, but this did not affect the water wall's ability to halt the stone's advance. Is this the benefit of having a sorcerer? Chu Tianxiong looked at the massive stones constantly dropping ahead and muttered an emotional sigh to himself. He knew that he had defended cities before, but when facing this situation, they always deployed generals of the Meridian Opening Realm or even the Divine Power Realm to resolve it. As long as one reached the Meridian Opening Realm, it was quite easy to shatter a stone weighing tens of thousands of pounds. When facing this situation, they naturally chose to use the cultivators in the Meridian Opening Realm within their army to deal with the massive stones in the sky. But now, he hadn't expected Guo Jia to block these incoming massive stones so easily. One must know that this saved hundreds of cultivators in the Meridian Opening Realm. This also made him redefine the key to defending a city. If they truly had a sorcerer, then defending the city would likely become much simpler. The trebuchets outside hurled stones for a long time, but they failed to breach the water wall even for a moment, only leaving many massive stones piled up outside the water wall. Seeing this scene, the old king of Jinshi knew that the trebuchets and archers were useless, so he waved his hand and ordered the soldiers to directly charge toward Kaiyuan City with scaling ladders. Since archers and trebuchets were useless, he chose to use his large army to forcefully capture Kaiyuan City. Stone gathering technique, gather. Guo Jia looked at the soldiers below, carrying rows upon rows of scaling ladders and charging toward his side, and a scornful smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Immediately afterward, he formed hand seals again, and the massive stones that had just been hurled by the trebuchets outside gathered outside the gates of Kaiyuan City, forming a gigantic stone giant. In the giant's hand, he carried a heavenly halberd. Of course, this heavenly halberd was also composed of massive stones. The giant continuously swung the heavenly halberd in his hand. Every time the heavenly halberd fell, hundreds of soldiers perished. Chu Fan carefully examined the giant in front of him. At this moment, he realized that this giant bore a 3/10 resemblance to Lu Bu, and a look of astonishment appeared on Chu Fan's face. He hadn't expected Guo Jia to construct the giant based on Lu Bu's appearance. However, before Chu Fan could think further, the water in the moat on the other side was gathered by Guo Jia into a giant wielding a long spear. Looking closely, this giant wielding the long spear bore a 3/10 resemblance to Zhao Zilong. Zhao Zilong and the others standing beside Chu Fan naturally noticed this strange sight. Thus, Zhao Zilong, Chu Tianxiong, and the others all cast strange looks toward Guo Jia. Guo Jia noticed everyone's gazes and merely smiled calmly, then continued to command the two giants to fight the soldiers outside. Why does that giant look so much like Brother Zilong? While others didn't comment, Luo Qingyun, the little one, looked at Zhao Zilong with a confused expression and spoke. During this period, she had become very familiar with Zhao Zilong, so when she saw the giant outside, it seemed familiar. The little one examined the giant composed of the moat water, and then examined Zhao Zilong in front of her. After hearing the little one's words, Zhao Zilong couldn't help but cover his eyes. He hadn't expected his own military advisor to use the moat water to form his likeness. I wonder what Lu Bu will think if he finds out. This is what Zhao Zilong was thinking in his heart. What Lu Bu would think if he knew. Of course, Zhao Zilong didn't mind. After all, although his military advisor was a bit mischievous, he had successfully stopped the attack of the armies outside. Chapter 54 The Bluebird makes another move. Chu Fan's little revelation. As for Chu Tianxiong, Shangguan Qinsheng, and the others, when they saw the two giants created by Guojia, their eyes held nothing but curiosity. After all, this was the first time they had truly witnessed a sorcerer casting their spells. It could be said that this was the first time they had seen a sorcerer perform magic, so they naturally had to observe it carefully. Unlike the mood of Chu Fan and the others, the old king of Jinshi outside was distraught, as their army had already lost over 1,000 soldiers in just this short amount of time. Although they had only lost 1,000 soldiers, the old king of Jinshi still felt pain, especially since only dozens of breaths had passed. Furthermore, they hadn't even reached the gates of Kaiyuan City, yet so many soldiers had fallen. Your Highness, if this continues, more soldiers will fall. Please allow your subordinate to go out and deal with the sorcerer of Kaiyuan City. An old man of the Shenyu realm beside the old king of Jinshi spoke with some reluctance, watching the continuously dying soldiers. At the same time, his eyes were filled with excitement. Clearly, he also wanted to exchange blows with this sorcerer and see if the legendary sorcerers were as miraculous as rumored. Go! The old king of Jinshi looked at the old man of the Shenyu realm before him and slowly spoke, knowing that the best course of action right now was to eliminate the sorcerer. Otherwise, they would truly waste an unknown amount of time before they could capture Kaiyuan City. Upon hearing the words of the old king of Jinshi, the spirit-roaming cultivator instantly stepped into the air, and the next second, his figure appeared outside Kaiyuan City. Qingyao, don't let him destroy Guojia's courtesy name spells. Chu Fan on the city wall naturally saw the spirit-roaming old man standing outside Kaiyuan City, so he instructed Qingyao, who was beside him. Qingyao had long been eager to try, and upon hearing Chu Fan's command, she immediately held the instantaneous spear in her hand and leaped, appearing before the old man. The old man was just about to strike and destroy Guojia's spells, but he didn't expect a woman to suddenly appear before him. However, the old man did not take Qingyao seriously at this moment. Instead, he directly smashed a punch toward her, as if this single blow could finish her off. Seeing this, Qingyao did not hesitate for a moment, wielding the instantaneous spear as she charged toward the old man. The instantaneous spear in her hand shone brightly, and the moment it collided with the old man's fist, his eyes suddenly widened. He felt a powerful qi surge from the punch, and he was directly sent flying by this formidable qi. As for Qingyao, she continued to charge toward the old man, holding the instantaneous spear. The instantaneous spear in her hand seemed to carry immense power. Seeing this, the old man did not dare to hesitate, instantly pulling out a large saber from his storage pouch. He then raised the saber with both hands to block Qingyao's spear strike. Just like that, the old man and Qingyao began their great battle. Although the old man's strength had also reached the late Shenyu realm, he was slightly disadvantaged when facing Qingyao, who was also at the late Shenyu realm. Without the old man's interference, the two giants below continued to slaughter the West Town King's estate army advancing toward Kaiyuan City. The weapons in the hands of the two giants seemed like death god's tools, harvesting lives. At this point, the West Town King's estate army began to feel fear from the slaughter. Many soldiers even started to hesitate, as, under the current circumstances, if they continued to attack, it seemed nothing awaited them except death. Damn it! How does Chu Tianxiong have such powerful experts by his side? Golden Guards, it's your turn. Seeing this scene, the old king of Jinshi hadn't expected there to be so many experts within Kaiyuan City, but as the old king of Jinshi, he naturally had trump cards. As soon as his voice fell, hundreds of soldiers wearing golden armor instantly leaped out from the army, and these hundreds of golden lights charged toward Kaiyuan City. This was one of the trump cards cultivated by the West Town King's estate. Chu Fan on the city wall naturally saw this scene. He also hadn't expected the West Town King's estate to possess so many divine power cultivators. However, he was not flustered at this moment, as he had already summoned the experts of the net of Luo here long ago. Leave none alive. Chu Fan waved his hand at the air, and then one man in black after another walked out from the space behind him. The chi emanating from these men in black had clearly reached the divine power realm, and the strongest among them even possessed the chi of the Grotto Heaven realm. These men in black were naturally the top assassins of the net of Luo. Their cultivation had all reached the divine power realm, and they showed no weakness when facing the trump cards of the West Town King's estate. One Luo Wang assassin after another charged directly toward the king of Jinxi's golden guards before them. So this is your net of Luo, brat. It is truly powerful. Chu Tianxiong slowly walked up to Chu Fan at this moment and spoke with emotion. He had naturally known for a long time that Chu Fan secretly possessed the power of the net of Luo, but initially, he always thought the net of Luo was merely an intelligence-gathering organization. After all, from the beginning until now, the net of Luo had never truly taken action. Instead, they had only continuously delivered information to Chu Fan. But the appearance of the net of Luo now completely shattered his previous assumptions. The net of Luo forces that appeared just in Kaiyuan City already included hundreds of divine power realm cultivators. So how powerful must the net of Luo be in other places? At this moment, Chu Tianxiong didn't even dare to imagine it. That's right, they're the net of Luo, one of my intelligence organizations. Chu Fan naturally replied to Chu Tianxiong without the slightest concealment. Since the net of Luo had already revealed itself, and Chu Tianxiong already knew of its existence, Chu Fan naturally wouldn't hide much. Brat, tell me honestly, just how powerful is the net of Luo? And besides the net of Luo, what other intelligence organizations do you have? Chu Tianxiong was even more surprised after hearing Chu Fan's words. He hadn't expected that his own brat had other intelligence organizations besides the net of Luo. Chu Tianxiong stared at Chu Fan with a look of curiosity. The net of Luo totals several million members, though of course, the number of true experts isn't that high. There should be thousands, perhaps up to 10,000, divine power realm members in the net of Luo. As for those above divine power, that is a secret. Chu Fan realized that his recent words had revealed too much, so he slowly waved his hand and spoke to Chu Tianxiong. After this period of development, the strength of the net of Luo had increased significantly. The number of divine power realm Luo Wang assassins should have reached 10,000. Millions of members? Wouldn't that be a million-strong army if gathered together? And among them are 10,000 divine power realm cultivators. Chu Tianxiong instantly froze after hearing Chu Fan's words. He had long guessed that the net of Luo was strong, but he never imagined it consisted of millions of members. More importantly, the net of Luo had actually reached 10,000 divine power realm cultivators. This was something he wouldn't have dared to think about initially. Chapter 55 Chu Lushan led the Northern Liang cavalry to appear behind the Jinxi army. However, Chu Tianxiong also knew in his heart that as an intelligence organization, the most important thing was not to form an army, but to investigate the world's intelligence. Chu Fan possessing a million net of Luo also meant that every move in the entire Great Yin was under his control. It was even possible that every move in the entire eastern region could not escape Chu Fan's notice. Moreover, besides these millions of net of Luo, there was also the existence of the embroidered uniform guard. Although Chu Tianxiong did not know whether the embroidered uniform guard or the net of Luo was stronger or weaker. However, the embroidered uniform guard, being mentioned alongside Chu Fan and the net of Luo, would naturally not be too weak. Thinking of this, Chu Tianxiong took a deep breath. He had not expected his son to possess such terrifying power. Shangguan Qingsheng and Luo Tianyi naturally also heard Chu Fan's words. Their eyes similarly looked at Chu Fan with fright. Especially Shangguan Qingsheng. She understood even more the terrifying nature of having over 1 million intelligence organization members. Presumably, the entire eastern region was now within Chu Fan's sight. One must know that even the Tianxin dynasty's intelligence organization personnel only numbered in the hundreds of thousands. Even such an intelligence organization was already considered one of the powerful organizations in the eastern region. But now, when facing Chu Fan's intelligence organization, it appeared so insignificant. Chu Fan ignored everyone's shock and instead slowly turned his gaze towards the net of Luo and the Golden Guards who were fighting fiercely outside the city wall. The net of Luo truly lived up to its origins as assassins. Although the Golden Guard's strength was formidable, they were still somewhat lacking when facing the net of Luo. One after another, Golden Guards continuously fell at the hands of the Luo Wang assassin. The battle lasted only a moment, and these hundreds of Golden Guards had already fallen. After the Luo Wang assassin dealt with these hundreds of Golden Guards, they instantly vanished into the air as if they had never appeared. However, the corpses of these Golden Guards below clearly indicated the Luo Wang assassin who had just appeared. The old king of Jinxi looked at his estate's trump card vanishing completely in just a moment. Besides a trance, his eyes held more disbelief. He had not expected his estate's trump card to be resolved so easily by the other party. One must know that this was the foundation that the West Town King's estate had spent decades cultivating. Just as the old king of Jinxi was in a trance, the old man of the Xinyu realm was also directly killed by Qingyao. Subsequently, his corpse slowly fell from the sky, a look of unwillingness on his face. Qing Yao, who had killed this old man of the Xinyu realm, who was also in the late Xinyu realm, leaped up and returned to the city wall, staying by Chu Fan's side as if nothing had happened. The old king of Jinshi looked mournfully at the fallen old man of the Xinyu realm, and at the same time, his eyes also showed the soldiers who were attacking the city and falling. At this moment, an ominous feeling arose in the old king of Jinshi's heart. Just as the old king of Jinshi was about to send out more strong individuals to attack, he felt the ground beneath him begin to vibrate in waves. "They're here." A smile appeared on Chu Fan's lips on the city wall. He looked at the rear of the Jinshi army and slowly uttered two words. Chu Tianxiong and the others, upon hearing Chu Fan's words, also turned their gazes towards the direction Chu Fan was looking. At this moment, they saw dust rising from behind the Jinshi army, as if a terrifying army was moving within it. However, their guess was correct. An army indeed appeared behind the Jinshi army, and this army was precisely the Northern Liang Iron Cavalry. The main reason Chu Fan had Guo Jia hold back the Jinshi army in front of him was to give Chu Lushan time. "Brat, is that army behind also yours?" At this moment, Chu Tianxiong had naturally seen clearly the army that was continuously moving towards the Jinshi army from behind, so he looked at Chu Fan with some astonishment. He could clearly see that the number of that army had reached at least 100,000. One must know that the manpower and resources required to create such a terrifying cavalry army were not something ordinary people could imagine. That's right, they're the Northern Liang Iron Cavalry led by Chu Lushan. Chu Fan said calmly, looking at the large army that was about to reach the Jinshi army. At the same time, his eyes also held a hint of anticipation. He wanted to see just how powerful the Northern Liang Iron Cavalry's combat strength truly was. At this moment, Chu Tianxiong also remembered the fat man from earlier, and he also recalled the conversation between his son and that fat man. Initially, he didn't believe that fat man had such capabilities, but now, looking at the mighty army behind them, a strange expression appeared in Chu Tianxiong's heart. Judging by the current situation, it was possible for that fat man to resolve the army outside within a day. After all, the strength of the armies Chu Fan had displayed was not weak, so this army behind should also not be too weak. Shangguan Qingqing's pupils also flickered continuously. Her eyes looked at Chu Fan with anticipation. The more she spent time with Chu Fan, the more mysterious she found him to be. Now, he had even brought out an iron cavalry numbering over 100,000, and Chu Tianxiong's expression showed that the Prince of Jinbei's estate was unaware of Chu Fan's army. This meant that the owner of this army was solely Chu Fan. Adding to that the net of Luo and the embroidered uniform guard that Chu Fan had revealed, Shangguan Qingqing felt that Chu Fan's strength was probably already not inferior to an imperial dynasty. As for Luo Qianni, who was beside her, she had always kept her gaze on Chu Fan. At this moment, Luo Qianni did not yet know that she was already completely captivated by Chu Fan. His figure constantly appeared in her heart. Different from the mood of Chu Fan and the others, a gloomy expression appeared on the old king of Jinshi's face at this time. He had not expected that he had fallen into the trap of Chu Tianxiong and Chu Fan this time. If he still couldn't figure out that this was a trap, then his title as king of Jinshi would have been in vain. "Your Highness, we estimate there are 100,000 iron cavalry behind us. How should we deal with these 100,000 iron cavalry now?" The deputy general beside the old king of Jinshi asked him with a difficult expression. He also had not expected such a situation to arise today. Upon hearing the deputy general's words, the old king of Jinshi's face also showed a thoughtful expression. Their situation was not optimistic. If they turned to attack the 100,000 strong army behind them, then the army inside Kaiyuan City would definitely attack them from their rear again. But if they ignored the 100,000 iron cavalry behind them, they would definitely suffer heavy losses this time. Moreover, he currently had no good way to break through Kaiyuan City. So, no matter what, they were in a state of being attacked from two sides. No matter what choice they made, they would face an attack from two sides, and if they chose poorly, their losses this time might be the greatest.